Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Information on how to watch, attend, and participate, as well as agendas, minutes, and recordings can be found at broomfield.org/council meetings. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 participants have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1 minute to speak. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available through the AV team in the back of the council chambers. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. No council members are absent and a quorum of the council is present. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. We'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? No, thank you. Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. There are no items under petitions and communications this evening. Before we begin the council member report section, I want to remind everyone that the City and County of Broomfield is participating in a Precious Child's A Precious Gift Toy Drive. The program runs through this Friday, December 13th, and the city has collection bins set up here and both the rec center, the library, and the Health and Human Services building. So please consider donating and helping to provide gifts to children who would otherwise go without. You can find a list of high-need items on Precious Child's website at apreciouschild.org. Does any other member of council have any updates or reports this evening? Not seeing any. Perfect. We'll now continue with general public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed elsewhere on this evening's agenda. So come on up, give your name and neighborhood for the record, and
Brandon Berman, Sunny Slope. Imagine it's 10 a.m. on Saturday, April 26, 2025. From the earliest time zone in New Zealand, people come together in parks and plazas, standing in harmony. A deep breath signals the start of something extraordinary. At the same moment, across the globe, from New Zealand to Hawaii, communities unite for health, wellness, and peace. This is World Tai Chi and Qigong Day. One world, one breath. This year, Broomfield will join the global tradition by hosting its first ever World Tai Chi and Qigong Day at Anthem Park. Celebrated in over 80 countries, this event brings people together through the healing practices of Tai Chi and Qigong. These gentle movements promote physical vitality, mental clarity, and emotional balance, values that resonate deeply with our fast-paced world. Honorable members of Broomfield City Council, we ask for your support in making this inaugural event a success. 1, an official proclamation. Declare April 26, 2025 as World Tai Chi and Qigong Day in Broomfield to show our commitment to health and tranquility. 2, promotion. Help spread the word through city channels to invite as many residents as possible to participate. This is more than a one-day event. It's a movement. It's a chance to inspire our community to slow down, take a breath, connect with one another and the world. Together, we can make Broomfield part of this global celebration to embrace the motto, one world, one breath. As I said, my name is Brandon Berman. I teach Tai Chi at Paul Direct Rec Center and Qigong. And also I have some students with me that do Tai Chi as well as my daughter who does Tai Chi and Qigong. And on behalf of all of us, we'd like to thank you for your consideration and your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. My name is John Ewald from Pinnacle North Subdivision. I'm speaking tonight to extend my thanks to Council members Marsh Holshan and Anderson for asking direct questions last week on my behalf. Thank you both for being willing to ask questions raised by a concerned citizen, especially since I am not in your ward. I would also like to thank DA Mason for presenting at last week's meeting. In my questions for DA Mason, I had failed to grasp the difference between diversion and delayed judgment, and I appreciate that DA Mason pointed out the difference. My intent in asking questions was to suss out misunderstandings like this. Hopefully the data dashboard can be updated to make this difference more clear. Based on DA Mason's presentation, I have a few questions for this council. First, DA Mason made the statement that prosecutions in Broomfield are up as a justification for higher DA costs. He used the chart on slide 17 in his slides as proof of this statement. The chart on slide 17 showed felony cases filed in Broomfield increasing when compared to 2020, but still below the 2019 numbers. So that raises two questions. Since the majority of cases are misdemeanors, 76 versus 23, and the misdemeanors are not accounted for in slide 17, are total prosecutions really up in Broomfield? Second, if prosecutions are up and crime in Broomfield is down, as Chief Hempelman has reported, then does that mean BPD is making more arrests? That is the only logical way I can resolve these two statements. If that's the case, kudos to BPD and keep up the good work. Second, DA Mason pointed out that it is perfectly reasonable for Broomfield to negotiate with Adams County for DA costs. Does this council intend to instruct staff to do that? It seems reasonable to me that this negotiation start ASAP to adjust budgets for 2025, or at a minimum, set the expectations for 2026 that Broomfield will only be paying a fair share. Third, it seems the DA costs to Broomfield do not match the population totals. Maybe I'm using incorrect numbers, and I would appreciate being corrected if that's the case, but we have been told that Broomfield is 12% of the district, so we should be paying 12% of the DA's budget. The budget presented in the slides is 28 million, and 12% of 28 million is 3.36 million. Why is the DA budget line item in 2025 for Broomfield $5 million? Finally, will you invite the DA back to speak on a regular basis? Chief Hempelman presents on crime and safety in Broomfield on a quarterly basis, so it seems justifiable that the DA's office does the same about prosecution of those crimes to complete the picture. Additionally, it seems reasonable to continue the conversation with the DA to revisit the questions he artfully dodged or incompletely addressed in his presentation, especially since he is contracted to work with and for Broomfield. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ewald, if you want to email that to us as well, so we can actually follow up.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello.
I'm Jessica Jones. I'm the director of the Broomfield Early Childhood Council. I'm here today with my friends Mercy Manresa and Brooke Brogel. We are the Broomfield Early Childhood Council, a Broomfield-based community nonprofit supporting the education and well-being of children 0 to 8, their families, and their providers. Today, we came here because we wanted to talk publicly about some of the work we're doing and things that are upcoming. 3 things to be exact in 2.5 minutes, so I'll go a little bit fast. So first of all, our annual report, Brooke brought some print out of it. Just wanted to share with you the great work that we've done in 23-24, our last fiscal year. In the report, it says who we are, what we do, and why we do it. I'll throw it up online. Again, we have it in print here. This is the first time that we're releasing it, so wanted to share it with you there. Also, Universal Preschool, what we also call UPK. We're entering our 3rd year of it, if you can believe it. This is the state universal preschool system that has 10 to 30 hours of free preschool for 4-year-olds all across the state. Broomfield Early Childhood Council is what we call the LCO, or the Local Coordinating Organization, where we implement universal preschool here in Broomfield exclusively for our private preschool providers. The school districts are managed by our neighboring counties, so we work specifically with our private providers. We have 19 of them and approximately 859 kids that are enrolled in preschool, so doing pretty good for our little Broomfield. So also to say to the community and to anybody listening online, registration opens for the school year 25-26 on December 17th. So if you have a child, this is going to get confusing, but I'll just say it. If you have a 4-year-old that is born, or a child that is 4 between October 2nd, 2024 and October 1st, 2025, they are eligible for the universal preschool. We will have the registration link online. You can email us, you can call us, we can walk you through it. Mercy works specifically with families, and Brooke works with the providers. So we're here to help support the community through that process. Finally, our partnership meeting is on January 30th. The goal of this meeting is really to drive discussion, explore, and learn, and always just build awareness, looking at the specific intersection of affordable housing and childcare. We know that those are the 2 biggest expenses for young families. So what does it do for our young families, having that stress and that pressure of upwards of $5,000 a month on childcare and a mortgage? We just really want to call attention to that. We want to also call attention to elevating the care of having accessible childcare in affordable housing units. So thank you very much. Call or text me if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones. And if you want to leave those at the dais or pass them out to the end of the council, we could take a look at it. Thank you for bringing those.
Good evening, everyone. Martin Dormish. I live in Ward 1 in the Birch neighborhood. And I have a couple things. First of all, I just wanted to thank council and staff for all the hard work that you all put in, especially this time of year. It does not go unnoticed. Also, too, wanted to give a shout out. We've already mentioned a couple times tonight, local nonprofits, and today is Colorado Gives Day. I think as many of us know and have been getting emails in our inboxes all day. This is a great time to support local nonprofits like A Precious Child and the Early Childhood Council and FISH, etc., the Refuge, because oftentimes on this day, if you make donations, they can be matched or multiplied. So it really does make a difference. And then I also wanted to invite everyone to attend the 5th annual We Will Remember Memorial Vigil that will be held on Saturday, December 21st. At 4:30 p.m. at Holy Comforter Episcopal Church on 10th Avenue. So this is something we've done this will be the 5th time consecutively since before COVID, and it's a time to remember our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness, which is best estimates these days are around 300 people in Broomfield experiencing homelessness right now. And then we also remember the people who have died while experiencing homelessness in Broomfield, and since 2019, that number is now 6. So I invite you all to be there. It'll be outside, and it's at dusk on purpose because it's the shortest day, longest night of the year on the winter solstice. And last year we had a great group that came to remember everyone. And yeah, so I'll send out an invitation tomorrow via email, but just wanted to mention that tonight. Thanks.
December 21st.
December 21st.
Thank you, Mr. Dormish.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. I just had one question tonight, and I'm hoping we're going to talk about it, but it has to do with the Severe Weather Activation Program. At the beginning of the year, they were budgeted $200,000 for this. And it basically, my understanding is whenever there's severe weather, we're able to open up places for people. Has to be a certain degree, has to be so cold, et cetera. Now, all of a sudden, they want $36,000 just for the month of December. Okay, in the first place, the month of December, by the time they would be given this money, December will be half over. So I don't see why they need $36,000. But the other thing is, so what that averages out to is about $17,000 a month that they're giving. But I can only see maybe 3 or 4 months out of the year when that would actually be activated, where they would it be cold enough for those people to need to spend that money. So my question is, what happens to the 17,000 a year on the other 8 months or so of the year when they don't need to
Well,
open
Mr.
this?
Carruthers, it actually would have been more appropriate for you to speak when that agenda item comes up.
Okay,
You've
I
already
didn't know for
spoken,
sure.
so
You just
I-
said general, so,
yeah, no, general is for items that aren't on the
Okay.
agenda, but you've already, go ahead, finish.
oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So that's really just my whole question at this point is, I don't see why we need the additional $36,000. It seems like they should have a big enough surplus right now to cover the other 15 or 16 days that are left in December.
We'll hang out for when that item comes up and we'll try to
Great.
get you some answers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carruthers.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Thanks so much for this opportunity. I'm Peter Muller with VUBA. I'd like to discuss the pressing issue of public transportation in your community and propose an innovative solution. For 2 decades, Broomfield residents have paid taxes for light rail, yet you still lack this essential service. Now there's talk of passenger rail. This may mean you don't get any stations at all. We need a creative solution that enhances connectivity to Denver, while at the same time improving local mobility in a cost-effective and sustainable manner. I'd like to introduce Automated Transit Networks, ATN, a technology that provides these benefits. ATN systems feature fully automated vehicles on exclusive guideways, offering on-demand origin to destination services. With over 100 years of combined public service in the USA and worldwide, they have completed over 200 million passenger miles without causing a single injury accident. The key advantages of ATN systems include flexibility, serving multiple origins and destinations with guideways at grade or elevated, efficiency, providing on-demand operations with express service, environmental benefits, reducing car traffic, congestion, and emissions for a greener city. Cost effectiveness. Farebox revenues cover O&M costs, even makes a profit on O&M. Our company, VUBA, which means Go Quickly, is preparing to submit an unsolicited proposal to RTD for a viability study of ATN in our region. We seek support from Broomfield and other local agencies for this initiative and would appreciate the chance to present our proposal in detail to you and/or key staff members. If you find our ideas are compelling, we hope you'll support our efforts to encourage RTD to bring this innovative transportation solution to Broomfield and Westminster. By embracing ATN technology, Broomfield could lead in sustainable urban transportation, addressing current connectivity issues while providing a flexible solution for our growing community. I have brochures with more information about VUBA and ATN technology I'll leave behind. Thank you for your time and consideration. We look forward to the possibility of working together to enhance Broomfield's transportation infrastructure. I think we'll agree that it would be good to improve mobility for all, the young, the old, the rich, and the poor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you want to email us, there's an email address on our website, council@broomfieldcitycouncil.org to try to set something up.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much. Anyone else? Come on up.
Hello, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City staff, and Council. My name's Jesse. I'm from Country Estates. In the 30 seconds it took me to look up VUBA, the company, it appears to be a worse monorail. So I would just caution that with any considerations that may come. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? Anybody online? Not seeing any. All right, moving on. We'll now continue with the reports section of the agenda. City Manager Hoffman is absent this evening due to illness. Deputy City and County Manager Burton Zeddy, do you have any reports this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have a report for you this evening. I'm going to ask Ms. Julie Story, Communications and Engagement Director, to provide that for the City Council.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. As you know, a couple weeks ago, we had a short discussion on the community survey that's going to be coming out in Q1 next year. And you all had asked to kind of have a little bit more of a follow-up on some of those questions that we were talking about around funding. So we wanted to bring those to you today. Before we get into the questions, I just want to remind everybody, when we're talking about a community survey, this is a survey that is at 100,000-foot level. It's a very high level survey. It's not something that we would be getting into detailed questions on things, be able to really provide context. This is the survey that we ask a couple of times. We do this every other year. So 25 is our next year to do this. We last did it in 23. We ask some timely questions each time, but for a lot of the questions are those benchmark questions that we repeat each time so that we have those survey over survey decades of data that we can go through and see how we're doing and how our community is rating us. So just wanted to remind everybody about that as we move into. So next slide. The first one that we'll talk about is we had talked about, we've asked this question in years past. This is for transportation services. There are two questions that are listed here, and really the difference in them is you can see the top one is asking about through a tax increase, would residents be willing to pay more for local transportation priorities? And this gives a few examples as well as talking about infrastructure needs, reducing congestion, improving safety, and promoting sustainability. So that top question is about the local priorities. Again, the second question is about the regional priorities. So this one happens to have two questions because we wanted to separate those out in case people wanted to talk about them separately.
Did you want feedback on each one as we
It's
go?
up to
or
you.
you
I
wanna
can go
wait till
through
the end?
everything.
Just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
There's only the three topics.
Okay,
right?
so let's do that.
We can.
The second one, next slide. If we go to the second one, this is for library services. Again, just to see if the community has any interest in supporting a library expansion or second library facility. So again, asking about, would you be willing to pay more for the expansion, a second library, both or neither? So that's our library question as we have it right now. Next slide. If we look at the housing question, this was one that we had reached out to our housing partners for some feedback on. That top question, this would not be two questions. I'm showing two questions at this point because the top question is the original question that we had put together. The bottom question is the one that we had gotten the feedback on from our housing partners. Again, talking through would residents have an appetite to pay more for supporting housing initiatives? If we can go to the next slide on this. The one thing that I do want to say is that for the housing question, staff is recommending to not include a housing question on the community survey. Again, 100,000-foot level in the community survey. Consulting with those community housing partners and our experts at Magellan Strategies, who is our survey partner that we're working with, housing questions would be better for that pulse survey, that short survey that we could do later next year. Separate housing specific survey would allow more of that context, deeper dive into some of those things that would be helpful to get more real data from our residents about the housing piece. So those are the three topics. Would we want to go back up to the transportation question? Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Curtis, if you don't mind.
All right, so since it's a report, we're not doing public comment, or are we, Ms. Rogers? I don't know. Okay, thanks. I
Mhm.
was right. So any questions or comments from council on the transportation question? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. We're answering, we're
You can
doing
do all three.
all of them, okay.
It's just three.
So my concern, and you mentioned it, is the fact that these are broad questions and not deep dives. Context is important. One thing I want to point out on the transportation questions, I particularly don't like the fact that we mention road widening many places and don't mention transit once. So if we're going to ask a question about transportation, we need to ask a question about transit, whether or not residents would want to provide local transit specifically. But again, I'm concerned about is there a cost benefit to doing this as part of the community survey and not as a separate poll later on?
Yes, I mean, each survey would cost more to do because it's not one lump sum, right? You're paying for each survey to be done.
Okay, and on the feedback we get, do we feel like we're getting better results on this type of survey versus a separate survey?
We have over the years gotten very good return numbers on our community survey. Since my time in Broomfield, we have only done one other pulse survey. We did get a good response rate to that one as well. I will say that obviously by the number of people that are in your council chambers each week, we have great engagement and our residents really want to be involved in all of the things. And so I do think that for many of these, but it's from my perspective, it's going to probably depend on the topic, right? There are topics that maybe more people are interested in, and it's a hotter topic at one time than another. So it's really going to depend on a lot of those on how you move.
I would say that thank you. I would say that I like the format of the library question much better than the format of the transportation questions.
Okay.
It gives options of different things. Would you support this or that or the other thing? I think transportation is such a broad area that it's difficult to get a real good sense of what people would support, because somebody might say, yes, I'd support road widening, but somebody else would say, I only support transit. And we wouldn't know that from these questions. So I think that's my comment on transportation. The library one, I like the format of the library question. I don't think it's problematic. Again, it's hard to do with specifics. And on the housing, I like the second question better. If you could go to that, I think the housing question, the second question is much more detailed and context versus just a yes or no. So I like that one better. But I'm perfectly okay doing it as a separate survey and not as this one too. So I think that's my only thought at the moment. So thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And just to clarify, if it was a transportation question, would that also include local transit that we don't have?
Again, because this isn't getting into that much detail, these are things that we would have control over, right? As Broomfield, these are things that the things that are listed
Well,
here.
local transit agency, we would have control
Right.
over too.
So it would really, this is just kind of the question, that very high level question to get the appetite of, do most residents feel that they want to invest more in transportation things? And then that would be up to council and those decisions that are made after. This is not leading in any one way or the other. It's just more, it's supposed to be that broad question to say, yes, we'd like to see more here, or no, we wouldn't.
Right, but it is missing local transit. So he's right about that.
Okay, got that
That's a
noted.
good
Thank you.
catch. which is what we need more than anything. All right, next is Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to, I guess, continue what I said in my email in response to this, that I don't really like the survey questions at all. And my preference is we don't ask them because they're based solely on the premise of, do you want to raise your taxes? And we're being asked to raise our taxes for a variety of very vague solutions. And I'd rather flip that over and find out what the problems are before we promulgate a solution, which may be a tax increase, which I doubt anybody on this council is really in support of raising taxes in 2025 or proposing that anyway. So I don't know why we would ask that question if none of us are really in favor of that. I would rather find out, do people think there's a bike safety problem? And to what degree? Because a bike and pedestrian safety, the solutions are broad and not everybody agrees on them, to whether you paint a strip down the street or you need permanent barriers or you need a separate lane. And this doesn't tell us, I wouldn't support that because I don't know what I would be voting tax on. I don't know what a widened road gives me. And I'm not really particularly aware of any narrow road bridges. I think it was bridges, wasn't it? Bridge widenings. And I'm not aware those bridges are particularly narrow. So I think it's asking way too much of people without giving them real solutions to consider. And I think we've already addressed the transit issues are really vague as well. And the housing, I think it'd be better to measure to what degree what are their concerns about housing? I mean, just anecdotally, I've heard people are frustrated because their kids can't afford an apartment in town and they're living with them. People may be concerned, maybe from the renters, maybe there's problems on that end with tenants and unable to pay, or just the general housing instability. How many people are unstable in housing and what would they think we should do about it? So I would propose that we'd not ask these questions at all. If we're not interested in proposing a tax, we should not ask it, but in particular because this is a snapshot in time, the data wouldn't be any useful to us in 2025 if we're not proposing a tax in 2025. If it's just to gauge data to do a tax in 2026, then we need to figure out the solution and ask about the tax when closer to the time we would ask voters to do that. And I'll just say, I don't think it's in the right environment right now for a tax increase because people are still adjusting to the property taxes from last time. We have an assessment, I think, coming up this June. Hopefully our assessments will drop, but we don't know. And people are going to be dealing with large water rate increases as well. So I think the environment is not good to even ask the question.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, like what Councilmember Marshall said, I was a little irritated that transit specifically was not called out in either local or regional. I would not support asking for road widening. We already have wide enough roads for the most part. Same with bridges. I think to kind of push back against Councilmember Cohen on pedestrian and bike safety, I think those solutions can look very different depending on the neighborhood, and trying to have a solution to give to people obviously doesn't fit within that 100,000 foot level, but it starts becoming very bulky and hard for people to just do in a quick answer the questionnaire in a quick fashion, knowing that we all have very busy lives. So I would like to see the bridge widening, road widening pulled, and transit specifically put in for local priorities, and then for regional, really calling out those key corridors like the 120th Avenue BRT that's provided in the Northwest Area Mobility Study, or NAMS. Same with Colorado 7. I understand the need and want for the I-25 Highway 7 interchange. Not sure why we included US 36 in Wadsworth. That should be CDOT's responsibility, in my quite honest opinion. And then the US 287 BRT corridor that we're developing with Boulder County. In terms of the library services, I like the question. I think that is perfectly reasonable. And then housing, I like, the one that was submitted from the housing partners. But I would like to see also a few tweaks in that it's very broad in that you provide, are we going to do funding sources through public-private partnerships, budget reallocations, or a ballot-approved tax increase? And saying, yes, I support housing initiatives could be, well, I support a public-private partnership and reallocation of funds, but not a tax increase. And that's not going to provide us with that delineation between the three options. That's all. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. So Ms. Story, what do you think the best way for, council to provide feedback on the language suggestions?
I think that, if there's anybody, I think it would be great to get these high level changes. If we do decide that we do want to include these in the survey, we can then make these changes and come back with other recommendations in whatever format you all would like to see.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Next, Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. I wholeheartedly support Councilmember Cohen's request just to not even talk about a tax increase, because that generally translates, council wants more taxes. And conversely, we can do funding without taxes too. So there's things like in Denver, the reason why their tax ballot initiative didn't pass is because there was no real designation as to where the funding was going to go, how it was going to be spent. So there's a lot of more intricacies when you talk about taxes. There could be taxes also on businesses, or it could be on people. So we're not really doing anything with that sort of question. I would like to parse out within transportation just the needs, and let's prioritize what people want, because I imagine people want mobility and multi-use trails. And I know in Ward 5, we're always talking about more traffic signals because people are just running rampant around Legacy, and we're dealing with that already. But I think we need to parse out and prioritize, and then, put out there different ways that we tackle issues in addition to tax increases, and who would the taxes be on, and what would that look like? So for transportation, I would like its own survey. And then on top of that, the housing survey, the housing partner survey is out right now. I do believe that does give some key access into some knowledge. And if we could have the results of that, we could piggyback on that if there are questions that were not answered with that. But again, I really do not want to see the words tax increase. We've already had a lot of taxes increase this year, per Councilmember Cohen's words up here, talking about property taxes and then also water increases as well. The library question too, again, I don't think that we need to say necessarily through a tax increase, but would we be willing to pay more? And then what does that look like? What are people willing to explore? Because again, the tax increase could be on the people, it could be on the businesses, it could be through other means, or it could be a fee. So there's different ways to tackle these issues. And like Councilmember Ward said too, public-private partnerships as well. And again, in transportation, I've always thought that one day, and I don't know how this rubber hits the road, but why aren't businesses, if they're not willing to put more parking out there, if they could use that parking funding, because apparently parking is very expensive, why can't they use that to put towards transportation? So maybe that could be an idea that we could add in there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I think the transportation question should be a separate survey. If we can't afford 2 a year, then we should delay one or the other. I would say go with the housing survey first in the first year, and then go with the transportation survey the second year. That would be my preference. I think the library question should be reworded. Some of my counterparts, colleagues have suggested ways to reword that with alternatives to funding. I guess I would support that also. But that's question seems straightforward to me. I think it could be in the community survey. The transportation and the housing, I think, are more nuanced and do need their own separate surveys. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, thank you. Here was my only thought was, is there value to, even if we're not anticipating any kind of tax increase, is there value to asking, to putting some kind of language like looking forward over the next several years and for planning purposes? And then ask the questions to kind of indicate that, no, we're not planning on raising taxes in the near term, but in 2 or 3 or 4 years, would you be willing? And then, I don't know if there's any value to it. Otherwise, if we're just collecting data and we're not actually planning to raise the taxes, then I would just say, let's skip all these questions. But if there's value to it for planning purposes and we indicate it as such, with that thought in mind, then I agree with the recommendation to leave the housing question off. I'm sort of indifferent on the transportation ones, but I will say that I would prefer the format of the library question where you're giving the menu of options of which ones would you be willing to pay more for, that we would do the same with the transportation questions. But I'm also okay just, if there isn't benefit for long-term planning, I'm okay just not asking any of them right now. So does that make
Yep.
sense? Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
I have a comment that we can't raise taxes. We don't have the power to raise taxes. We live in a state with the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So we're not actually talking about putting things on a ballot right now. This is a survey to gauge community input on whether or not we should move forward on a ballot question to ask the voters if they want to raise taxes, which they can say no. So just to clarify, this council is not talking about raising taxes. We couldn't even if we wanted to. Just a little fact.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to emphasize that I think the community should have a say on these questions. And I think that all of them, quite honestly, are issues that the community shouldn't have on the mayor's comment. And I agree with the mayor, the fact that the community should decide what, the Broomfield residents should decide what they want to be put up, I guess, in terms of the priorities. And I could see all arguments for, all these issues, just because, I feel like they all resonate with me, with infrastructure, with transportation, with the library. So I would not want to change the language. I think I might be the only one who might say that right here. But I just feel like residents should know if they're willing to, put the money, or if they really want to engage with these issues, then they should definitely say yes or no. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's being said, I think, but fundamentally, my concern is the way it's phrased. If we say, do you want to pay more, yes or no, particularly given, as has been said, the timing, I think we're going to get a lot of no's. I think either waiting, as Sam Anderson suggested, or asking it in a different way. Do you want an expansion of the library? Do you want an expansion of whatever? Without asking, are you willing to pay more? Because to me, that's a trigger. And it's a negative trigger. And I don't know that we're going to get an accurate reflection of what people really want. So I think the issue really is, what do you want in terms of these facilities and services, as opposed to yes or no, pay more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
I'll just keep it short and sweet. I don't think any of these should be on our community survey. Thank you.
All right. So anybody else want to weigh in? Any feedback? No? Do you have a good gauge that was there a majority of council that didn't want to put these on the community survey? Because I wasn't keeping a tally. Did I do a?
It would be helpful just to kind of maybe get a vote. I would say, just from comments made, I think, no, there was not a majority to say don't include any of them. But maybe just to make sure that we're on the right track, that would be terrific.
Okay, we'll go one by one since it's not an all or nothing. Who is in favor of adding the transportation services to be amended on the survey? 1, 2, 3, 3. Who is in favor of adding the library to the survey? 1, 2, 3, 4. And who is in favor of adding the housing question to the survey? 1, 2, 2. We do not have consensus majority to put any of these on the community survey. So if you guys are okay, we'll do the more micro focus with the housing pulse poll that we could really get more detail and just leave these off. And I really want to thank you for all your work in drafting these and in considering council's opinion. But you were right.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Story. All right, Attorney Rogers, do you have a report this evening?
Just a short one before I wish everybody a happy holidays. And I'm very excited to say that the city attorney's office will be bringing on a third-year law student as a legal intern, which is the first time we've been able to do that in many years. So as soon as she starts, we'll have her attend a council meeting so you can meet her. But as you know, I have a strong commitment to interning and letting students shadow. So I'm just super excited to have a law student be able to work for Broomfield. And she's interested in local government because it's pretty fun most of the time. So thank you, Mayor, and happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. You too. All right. Council's consideration of the consent items is next. Before we start, I want to note that item 6A is for the Board of Social Services. Council sits as this board and action of City Council is action of the board. The clerk will read all the consent items by title and there'll be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 6A through 6D by title?
6A, proposed resolution number 2024-171-BSS, acknowledging review of expenditures and electronic benefit transfers for July, August, and September 2024. 6B, proposed resolution number 2024-169, approving a revocable permit between the City and County of Broomfield and Interlochen Owners Association, Inc. for the installation of cameras in the right-of-way. 6C, ordinance number 2262, approving a business incentive agreement with Peak Energy Technologies, Inc., first reading. 6D, proposed resolution number 2024-173, approving a first amendment between the City and County of Broomfield and Almost Home, Inc. for severe weather activation program services.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comment, starting with in person. If anyone would like to be heard on any of these 4 items, please come on up. Don't see anyone online. Next are questions from council. Any council member? Council member Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just the question from the resident on 6D regarding the funding for the severe weather. Can we get it more detailed on the reason for the increase?
Mayor, we have Chris Dewhurst, Deputy for Human Services, be able to answer that question. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. Chris Dewhurst, Deputy Director of Human Services. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. What we're requesting is an additional contingency amount to go into our contract with Almost Home for $36,000 for the month of December. As we have gone through to estimate the potential number of activation nights versus the remaining amount of budget that we have, we don't want to be stuck in a position of having to shut down the program in the month of December, unable to house people out of the cold. In January, we will have additional funds to carry us through in 2025. So this is really contingency for us. Important to note that this is an alignment of funds within the Human Services budget to amend this up to amount within the contract. And it is also worth noting that we only pay for nights of activation. And so if nights are not activated, these funds will not be utilized. So it truly is a contingency to ensure that we can keep people out of the cold in the month of December.
Thank you. What do we, on a night that we activate, what do we normally spend on each night?
So each night we spend about $3,500 per activation. Our estimates are that there are typically, under typical circumstances, 12 nights of activations within December. And so what we have remaining of that $200,000 that was in our 2024 budget, we do not anticipate that it would carry us through the end of December.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And one other follow-up, Mr. Dewars. So what happens to the funds if they're not utilized? Do they roll back into the next year?
They come back to city and county
Okay.
funds. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
All right, any other council member questions? Seeing none, is there a motion by council that consent items 6A through 6D be approved? Councilmember Leslie?
I move the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Henkel? Or just hitting? the
No,
button?
sorry, I was gonna move.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Lim.
I just wanted to say that I appreciated that Peak Energy is moving to Broomfield, and good luck with your work on the sodium ion battery.
Any other comments? No? Any other discussion? Okay. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote. And the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. The first item under action items this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration on second reading of a proposed ordinance related to a sales and use tax reimbursement agreement for the Village of Westview. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you again, Mayor. Jeff Romine, economist with Fort Broomfield, will provide the presentation.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and deputy city managers. Again, I'm Jeff Romine. I'm the economist with the City and County of Broomfield, and I'm just going to cover this item. In honor of the holiday, I'm going to be like an elf and try to be really short. So next slide, please. You saw this, obviously this item came before you in November. It was approved from the PUD standpoint or the STP standpoint and some of the other planning issues. The one thing that we did cover then on first reading was the same agreement. It requires 2 readings under city charter, so therefore we're here for the second night. I'm not going to go through the development, but this is just a memory. And again, just as reference, north is to the left. So we're trying to fit it on in the slides and everything else. Next slide, please. Again, this is the development. The key points I would point out is you did approve the various planning items as well as the ability to move forward on an IGA agreement with the city of Westminster on the 12th of November. It's a mixed use development. It includes 78 units, including affordable or income aligned units. Sharon's not here, so she won't hit me in the back of the head. And 30,000 square feet of commercial. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through the tax reimbursement agreement just in a little bit more detail, even though I know we covered it. And that is the total private investment is roughly $60 million in today's terms. Obviously, they're not turning dirt yet, so some of that value will increase. And most of that is coming from the residential units. So just be aware of that. The tenant businesses, though, and then we expect somewhere around 5 to 10 businesses in total, depending on the square footage and some of the other space, will generate somewhere between $11 and $15 million in annual sales over the first 10 years. And so that gives you some sense. As we've reported, as I've reported to you before, we use different square footage numbers, perhaps than what it actually may produce. We try to do it to be conservative. So we're using $375 a square foot. Restaurants tend to operate around $600 a square foot or above. So you can tell we're doing it in a very conservative manner. As the developer pointed out, back in November, they are hoping for a good mix of retail and restaurants so that it really makes it an interesting place to come and shop as well as hang out. Oftentimes when you see developments that are all restaurants, then nobody knows what to do if you're too early for your reservation and vice versa. So this creates a curated market area. The tax reimbursement approach, these are the key things that I just want to re-hit for you all. One, this does not include any property tax from Jeffco or North Metro Fire District. This is just the city and county of Broomfield purely. Secondly, we are not touching real or business personal property taxes. And the reason why real and business property taxes, the reason why we're choosing to do that, including the real and personal property tax of businesses, those pay for the core services. And we're trying to follow that model in this case. And so that we're doing that. And also because, as you know, some of the mills are dedicated to both human services and the library. So we want to be very careful about how we utilize property tax. In many cases, we do it, and you have approved that in the past, but in this case, we feel we can do it without. So we are pledging 50% of the use tax. The use tax is paid at building permit, and so it's on the materials that are going to be used within the building, the concrete, steel, all the other things. They do an estimated, and then eventually it gets re-audited, and then we try to reconcile that. So we will be pledging 50%, and most of the agreement is then built around the sales tax. So that's the activity going on primarily in the restaurants and retail, and we are planning, and what the agreement calls for is no more than roughly about 32% is what we think it'll be, and roughly 25 is the base level. So we'll talk about that in just a second. Next slide, please. As you note, I do show this is just so that we're consistent in all of the data that we've given you back in November as well as today. So when we talk about the fiscal impact, that includes the programs and services that we do, all the expenses. And then I've reduced the amount of the added revenue by the amount that we'll be providing an incentive. And in that then case, we expect somewhere around at stabilization to be about $400,000 to $500,000 a year net coming to us. And that's primarily the property taxes as already illustrated. You can see the amounts. I'm not going to run through them all. You can see what we will be retaining through this. You can see what the amount is. Again, we are only using the base level of sales tax, the 3.5%. It does not include the open space sales tax as an example. So that's what we're doing, is we're being very base about this. The developer reimbursement based upon the modeling that we've done is that we would be giving them roughly $1.83 million. However, this does call for it to be more, as you noted in the agreement. It calls for it to go as high as $2.1 million. The reason for that, much like we try to do, and council has kind of indicated that this is a preference, is let's give them a reason to do exactly what they said or more. So we want them to do well, and we want to give them some incentives. So if they do better, if the restaurants do better and the retail does better and they generate more sales tax, we benefit and they benefit, and that's the goal there. So we're giving them an incentive to do that. In the end, we expect, based upon what we know, we should receive about 3.6 to their 1. So they'll get some and we'll get some, but we are getting, so it's just about 23% effectively. At that, next slide, please. If council wishes to approve the sales and use tax sharing agreement, it is recommended that you approve the ordinance 2259 in second reading. I will conclude with, before we go to questions, we have both of the development team, 2 of the lead people on it are here. They have, following my same approach of trying to be like an elf, they are not here to provide any presentation. They're here to answer any questions that council may have. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romine. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If anyone would like to speak on this item, now's the time. And there's no one online. Okay, any questions from council? We also got those answered last time. So then there being no further questions, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2259. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2259, approving a sales and use tax reimbursement agreement for the Village of Westview.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on second and final reading and order it published by title? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Thank you. Second, Councilmember Delgadillo.
Yes, second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Nope. All right. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2259. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote. And the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously. So congratulations. Welcome to Broomfield, and thank you all very much. Next, under action items this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration on second reading of a proposed ordinance related to tree preservation and mitigation measures during land development and redevelopment. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Kate Mack, Senior Landscape Architect, will provide the presentation on this item.
Hello, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I am Kate Mack, your senior landscape architect here. And if I could go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to high level the presentation that you have already seen before. So the purpose of our tree preservation ordinance is to preserve the trees, have a standardized for protective barriers, and also standardize the requirements for mitigation. Next slide, please. As you can also see, this chart gives you an overview of what the code does propose and not propose to do. The intent is to provide tree protection during construction and post-construction. Next slide, please. So one of the things that will be required is a tree preservation plan that will be included during the site development plan process, so that all staff, including planning, engineering, open space, and parks, can review it and help determine some of the best mitigation processes that could be used, which is also continued on the next slide, please. As we've discussed prior, there are 4 different mitigation options. And also in speaking with our forester, we have determined that most likely our current value of tree inch lost will be set at $750 per tree inch lost, because I do know that was a question with first reading. Next slide, please. Again, this is the example of the tree protection barrier that we will be looking for, the chain link fence that is outside the drip line of the canopy of the trees. Next slide, please. And if approved, I would like the ordinance to have an effective date of January 1st if council does decide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now proceed with public comments on this item. If anyone would like to speak on this one, come on up to the podium.
I've got to say my name last time, Bill Crothers, Northmore.
I know you. For the record, though.
So I read this and I saw in here one thing that just said this was probably not cost Broomfield anything. Is that still true? Is that a true statement?
As currently written in terms of cost in what manner?
There was just a comment in here that just said, I'm sorry, I don't have it right at the second, but it made the comment that,
There's not a
oh,
financial
yeah,
cost.
it's under the cost to Broomfield here. It says the tree preservation requirements will apply to future Broomfield projects that made existing trees would probably not cost the city money.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so that is true? Great, okay. That's all I needed to know.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to be heard? All right, well, questions from council are next. Does any member of council have any questions on this item? I don't see any more. So there being no further questions, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2240. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2240 to add chapter 17-71 to the Broomfield Municipal Code to establish tree preservation and mitigation measures during land development and redevelopment.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on second and final reading and order it published by title? Councilmember Marshallson?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen?
I second this motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. Seeing no discussion, let's move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2240. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item this evening is council's consideration on first reading of proposed ordinance number 2261 related to amending certain agreements related to the 2005 Borough Bonds, Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you again, Mr. Romine.
Welcome back.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, deputy city managers, and city attorney. I apologize for not recognizing you also. You are more than welcome, Attorney Rogers. I may be a little bit more than an elf this time, and I'm sorry, but this is an element, a little bit of a preview. So this action does require 2 readings. So we're here before you with the meat coming in January. So think of that part as being the after Christmas gift that we're going to be providing to you all. We are probably going to schedule that for roughly an hour conversation around that with you and Borough. So both those actions will be going through. There'll be a series of actions that will happen. The first step, though, is to put the city and county of Broomfield in the place to allow for the bonds to be refunded. It's the vernacular of bonds. We don't refinance bonds because you refund them, which means you pay off the old bonds and then you issue that debt into a new. The other part of that you're going to see is it allows us to move some of the money we have in reserves forward, which will actually make some of the savings occur in the bonds. So that's a little bit of a nugget. It's kind of like opening the corner of the Christmas present. I'm showing you a little bit about what it is. And hopefully mom doesn't catch me like she did when I was like 7 and then I'd lost that present, as it turns out. I never did get that. But moving on to the next slide, please. So again, this is just for background. You all know this, but I'm still going to say it. Borough financed the construction of the event center through an issuance of bonds of roughly $61 million in total in 2005. The bonds were payable through the property tax. That's how we're paying it, through the property tax and a small element of sales tax, that is 10% of the sales tax for that area, pledged to the URA at Arista. So it's actually called the Wadsworth Interchange, but most people don't know what that is. That's actually the Arista area. The Broomfield Event Center, as Borough decided, closed in December of 2023. And as many people know by looking at the online videos or driving by, but you can look on it anytime you want, day or night, and enjoy what's going on. There's nothing happening at night, though, luckily. But you will see the demolition. We expect the demolition not to occur in the year 2004, but in the year 2024. I guess I always have to have one typo in these things. This is purely me. So demolition is currently underway, as you know. Next slide, please. In 2005, the bonds were placed, as already mentioned. The current value of the bonds, the outstanding balance of the bonds is $31.23 million with the annual debt service. It varies because we're in a variable rate interest bond right now, but $4.73 million is what's coming up next. And those payments are paid. We are completely up to date. The new bonds are anticipated to be approximately 22.83. So as you can see, we're taking some of that reserve and we're going to be paying it off, and thus it'll allow the debt service to follow a little bit. The one thing that we have represented throughout this conversation, and we fully intend to keep that promise, all of us working on this, is we are not going to extend. This is not increasing the term. So when we come to you in January, it's still going to, the bond debt will be paid off when it's supposed to be paid off. So what we're doing is making a little bit of savings in various ways. The refinancing the bonds, again, the refunding really is what it is, will be done, and it will allow us to remove that, change that letter of credit. And the bank that currently has that letter of credit, which backs up the bonds, has let us know that they will not renew after March 1st. So this is something we need to do and have to do to move forward with the intended direction that the council and the Borough Board have told us to do. We have engaged various professionals, bond finance people, we have our bond counsel and others, and we've done that in the previous things. And we are anticipating coming back to you on January 14th so that we can have a bond closing roughly right at the beginning of March, so that we've changed everything and done exactly what the direction was of council and the Borough Board. The refinancing achieves various things. As you can see, I'm not going to go through. Those are both in the memo, but it allows us some flexibility as far as moving forward. So we may be able to sell the property and move the development forward in a more timely manner. We're not planning on necessarily, we're not waiting to 2030 to develop this property. We are looking forward to start moving forward on that at the same time. Next slide, please. If you agree with the direction that we're going, as you have directed us to, there are 2 items we have tonight before you, and they relate so that Borough can again continue to collect the money from the city and county of Broomfield and make these payments. And so we have to pledge once again our cooperation agreement and the reimbursement agreement so that we are a partner still in all of this activity. So that's really what the actions are. And again, as you note, it is really critical to update the renewal of the moral obligations and pledges, which you've already done. So all of these things are falling in place. It allows for the marketability of the bonds, I would say, and perhaps get a better permanent interest rate, which is what our goal is. And so we're removing risk by doing the things that we're doing. We're setting things up in order for us to be absolutely fiscally sustainable and good stewards of public money, in this case, Borough's money in the end. But quite frankly, again, CCOB money is going in through that pledge that we have in place. At that, I don't have any other part of the presentation. So the next slide again says this is what we're doing. And again, we'll be back on January 14th for second reading on these items, as well as the only reading on some of the other things that Borough and you will be doing. At that, Mayor, thank you for your time. We're happy to answer any questions. There is no presentation other than mine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Romine. Well, we'll now proceed with public comments on this item. If anyone would like to be heard, please make your way to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Roxy Jewell in Lackamore. The city uses bonds as, I don't know, you just use bonds too much. You never learn, and you never will learn not to overbond. The city and county someday is going to be upside down more than they already are. You can't do everything on borrowed money. You borrow, let's just say 10 million. You put it into a bond. It's $30 million later that the bond might get paid off or may not, like this one. Let's just go ahead and change it, change our date, have more money spent on it. But this city and county is not learning anything about financing. You're still stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Bonds are good for things that we really need, but unless it's water, I don't see any reason why you should bond anything. If you can't pay for something in a short amount of time, then you shouldn't be putting us into a financial bind. And that's all bonds are doing. If it was your home, how many times can you put a loan on your home before you're upside down? And pretty soon you can't make your payments. So I hear all the time, oh, we're making the payments just fine, just fine. Well, you're changing something right now so that you can make the payments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, staff, and City Council. Rick Fernandez in Broomfield Heights. Wanted to ask a question and like to make sure we all understand what's happening, and that's really with the demolition costs related to the event center, because following up on the previous comments, this is money that we still owe as a community. And I am concerned with the way that even when you get into a project like this, if things are on track. So question number one is, are things on track in terms of the demolition costs? And two, how is that being paid for, and how is that going to potentially affect the financial situation for the city? Thanks.
Thank you. I do believe those were answered in the memo. But yeah, and as most people see, these are from 2005 that we inherited. So it's in the memo. Go ahead.
Hi, Jesse, my name is Jesse Applegate. I'm from Country Estates. Mayor Pro Tem, council, and staff. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for your work with all of this. I was 0 in 2005, and so I didn't have much of an opinion on it. However, as I've attended these meetings, I've come to learn that our council in 2005 probably should not have graduated middle school with their various choices in governance. We have to pay it back now. We have no real choice unless we want things to get worse, unless we want to tank our own credit score. It's not great. I think I speak for everybody when I say that I wish this had not had happened, that we didn't have to deal with this, that we didn't build this stupid stadium. And, but we have no choice but to move forward and to continue to ensure that our city council makes the correct decisions. And I think this is the correct decision. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort in doing all of this. And thank you for serving the county.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? All right, we'll move on to council member questions next, starting with Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to ask staff, how much money is being saved by refinancing these bonds?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members. So we don't have a specific number yet that's going to be part of the issuance, and we'll be talking about that on January 14th. Again, these are borough bonds. These are not city and county bonds. And at that point is when we'll be discussing what the expectation is. It is based upon very preliminary things. It's probably going to be in excess of $1 million over the remaining 6 years of the bond life. And again, that's really what our goal has been, was to set all this up correctly. So again, these are borough bonds eventually, and that'll be coming to the borough board. This is allowing the city to be in the same role that it's been in before, in order to back those bonds with the funds that come through the URA.
Thanks. So, and typically refinancing is in fact a strategy to save money. And also you're going from variable bond rate to a fixed bond rate, which also has some advantages to us. Would you just explain for everybody what borough bonds are vis-a-vis city and county bonds?
So, and I apologize, I should have done this in the presentation just because there are people watching that don't live in this world like many of you do and I do every day. And that is the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority is borough. They are the ones that own the property right now, and they also have the debt on the property. So that's the bonds. So the refunding of that will be moving that still through borough. So this is a borough action that will occur. The city county of Broomfield just has to participate because as part of the original borough agreements and everything else, just like the school district does, we have to put certain monies in. So there's this action.
Right. So this is not a city county debt as such,
No.
but we have to be partners in that debt in this process.
We have
for
certain,
refinancing.
certain roles within all of this, and we have other roles, and the debt is boroughs.
Right. I appreciate that. And then I guess my final question has to do with our bond rating, even though this wouldn't affect our bond rating because it's not our bonds, as you said. But just for, again, everybody's understanding, what is our current bond rating, which I understand just went up? And do you know how that might relate to those in the region in terms of their bond ratings?
I believe the city and county's bond rating, it's one of the metrics we give council because it's something that you asked us to do. I believe we're the second step down. We're not the AAA, but we're the AA.
Right.
And I would, if Graham were here, I would defer to him this,
Sure.
but I'm looking at Anna. Am I correct in that?
I believe that's correct. We can confirm that tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd be interested in how we relate to our sister city counties as well. Because from my vantage point and given my experience, that's a very high rating for a city, county to have that level of bond rating, which speaks to the solvency of our city and county. It speaks to our good debt management, which also we had talked about during the water discussion is really valuable for the taxpayers because that lowers our rates. So having a strong, high level of a bond rating is very important, but it also is an indicator of the solvency of the organization. So I think this is a compliment to us that we have such a high rating, that we're doing the right thing, that we're taking care of this building that we have no choice but to take care of as we've already committed, and that borough is going to save money in this process. So
Yes,
thank
so
you.
you are correct. The borough bonds are considered very positive bonds also.
Okay.
And part of it is, and I just would add this as the final note, bonds are valued for a number of different reasons, including the income stream that's supporting them. In the case of the water bonds that you're referencing, that is because of the actions that city council took related to the monthly billing, that kind of base bill as opposed to the rate bill. In this particular case, these bonds are effectively backed up. We were looking at the numbers the other day, Carl and I, with the whole team, and the sales tax portion of the revenue that we're generating through that URA is primarily property taxes, sales taxes, a very small percentage. And that's actually more advantageous and more desired by most bond buyers.
Right. So the point I guess I'm trying to make is that we're not overextended. This is not a city-county bond. We're part of it for obvious reasons. We have a very high rating in terms of our bond ratings, which is very important. And they do great research on every organization. I know I've been through this many times myself. And so I understand the process, and they know everything that needs to be known. And I think this is a strong compliment to the financial stability of this county. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Just a couple questions. You mentioned that we are required to do this, correct? We don't have a choice but to refinance these?
Yes, because of the action we're taking and because we've actually had that letter of credit in the background, the issuance of that letter of credit, the group that's doing it now has determined that they're not going to do that going forward. We're one of the last organizations that they are still doing that for, and they are trying to move out of that. So it actually allows us to be, the way we're doing all of this and working with them, it's been in a very close conversation to make sure that everybody, including those that may be purchasing, see these as both strong bonds and allows us the flexibility to do what we need to do related to the property.
So on that note, just for a hypothetical, what would happen if we did not? If council didn't approve this, what would the result be?
I hate to talk about hypotheticals because we spent so much time building all this, but to some degree, the bonds become less secured, and therefore, to some degree, the owners, the current holders of the bonds may call the bonds. That may be one action that they could take. The other is we may have to put either through borough or potentially through CCOB additional security behind it, additional support, including an obligation. So it would likely be an expense both on the interest side, but as well as a potential expense on the other side of security.
Okay, thank you. And then one follow-up question. I noticed that our current bonds are 31 million roughly, and you said in your presentation where the new bonds will be 22?
28, I believe it was. Could
Okay.
you go back? I spend a lot of time with a lot of numbers, and so occasionally I get things a little gobbled, but I think it's too slight. There you go. It's going to be 20. Right now, we anticipate that the issuance will be for 22.83. And again, part of this is we have money in reserve that's required under the existing agreement with the existing bonds that will now be moving instead of having it paying off that last year, which was if you recall, there was a significant payment at the very last year that was calling for roughly $10 million. We can now move that money forward and then that's reduce the amount we're borrowing because we have the money in reserve Borough
was
does.
that was my follow-up
It's-
question. So we're
yeah.
doing away with the balloon payment at the end.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have.
That's good. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to clarify the residents' question. So the agreement that we had for the demolition of the First Bank Center, this was between CCOB and Borough, and that was for $4 million, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And the reason that we presented at the time was Borough does not have excess revenues in order to do the demolition. And it's in both in Borough's and the city's interest to demolish the building because it was safety issues as well as other issues. Sometimes it makes sense to leave buildings up, but generally speaking, if you know there's no reuse of that building, best thing to do is move it on. And so that's what I believe the city council felt was one of the compelling reasons for making that agreement between Borough and the city.
Thank you for that. So with I don't know if you have this number today, but just wanted to ask it. Do we have an idea of how much money has been spent so far? And if we don't have that or we do have it, my next question would be, is the demolition on track to not exceed that $4 million? Do we anticipate spending more than $4 million?
No, actually, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members and mayor. The answer is we actually are moving very quickly forward. It's almost surprising how fast it's going and how positive it's going. There was some decisions that were made as the project is moving forward, including leaving some of the south wall building up in order to continue with noise and dust mitigation. So that was actually done by the contractor that we have in place, that Borough has in place. It is on schedule at this point, and we anticipate it actually coming in less than the $4 million.
All right, thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lim.
There's a vague note in the memo, but I wanted to make sure there are no restrictions in any of these agreements that would put parameters in any way on our the future development of parcel A or B. Is that correct?
That is correct. Part of that reference really is bonds are placed with the non-taxable approach, the public ones, as well as taxable approaches. And so they have different outcomes when we issue them, or any government issues them. So they can have different consequences. What we're trying to do is be able to move forward, that if we have a interested developer who is something that we have vetted and feel very strongly about, and they go through the due diligence process, we could possibly sell the property in 2028 and therefore use the proceeds of that sale in order to pay off the bonds and the last two payments. So what we're trying to do is exercise approach that gives Borough, quite frankly, and therefore the city and county of Broomfield as a partner, a lot of flexibility in how we can move forward in the timing of that redevelopment.
Thank you. My other question, you referred quickly to the sales tax wanted by the bond buyers. So maybe this answers the question, but was there any discussion about changing the sales tax distribution between the parties in that agreement?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Councilmember Lim, no. So we're leaving all of the, we'll call it the URA agreements in place for what we're contributing and all of that. So we are contributing the property taxes as we have been before, and the 10% of the sales tax as we are before. We didn't want to open up this whole thing. We really wanted to begin moving forward rather than revisit anything from a previous time. The refunding is just something that provides us that flexibility. It's something that council and the Borough Board have both indicated a strong desire to do. And it's getting everything in place. In part, you can think about it, the bondholder previously had security of the debt in the sense of both the land and the buildings. And what we have done is secured the revenue stream. And that's really the strength of all this. It allows us to be flexible about the capital asset.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from council? I have a couple,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Romine. They're easy. So in 2005, who provided that first moral obligation that the city and county of Broomfield would be responsible for covering any losses on the First Bank Center?
I'm going to call up my colleague Carl Front because while I was born before 2005, like one of the previous speakers, I was not with the city and county of Broomfield.
Is that something that was commonplace, or is that very rare to do a moral obligation for something? I haven't done it before.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Carl Front, Senior Attorney. So in 2005, as they were trying to put together the financing package for this facility, they had to get a little bit creative. And so the moral obligation was one component of it. Those are pretty rare. City governments are try not to do those to the extent they can, because it is pledging your future general fund revenues to back up debt. And that restricts your ability to use those general fund revenues. And so they try not to do that. With the original structure, the moral obligation actually was in third place and the developer was ahead of that. The developer has never lived up to making their payments under it. And that's where the reserve fund with the moral obligation kicks in. The city has advanced dollars under that over the years I'm not gonna put a dollar figure on it because I don't remember exactly what it is tonight. But with the whole goal of this refinancing, we're now in a position to where we shouldn't have to do that going forward. We hope we don't have to do that going forward. The moral obligation does remain a decision of the city council on an annual basis if dollars are needed.
And
Does that
there's
help?
no way we can not honor that moral obligation that was made in 2005.
It is a decision for each city council every year of whether you want to or not. But as the name suggests, it is a moral obligation.
Right. And then lastly, that variable interest rate, was that part of the 2012 refinancing?
So Mayor Pro Tem, council members, the 2012 refinancing you're talking about, I believe was not related to this project per se. This is the 2005. The 12 you're talking is a city and county of Broomfield debt, a bond that we issued, and that is different from this completely. So I believe that's a fixed rate bond that we put out in 2012.
Okay, but y'all weren't around for that either.
Well, but and again, it's a city and county of Broomfield, not a borough.
Why do you think they did a variable interest rate though on this? I mean, it seems really,
I can't speculate on the motivations and reasons. There are times where you do decide that that's in your interest. People do that as an example with their home mortgages. There was the ARMs and other things that used to be in place, and you saw because of the cost of things that a variable interest rate gave them a different outcome. So it's a financing tool in this particular case because of where we're moving on the demolition of the building and everything else. It has been our goal to switch to a fixed because it gives us exactly the security and the knowledge of what we have to do to keep moving forward.
wonderful. Thank you both very much. There being no further question. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2261. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2261, amending and restating certain documents related to the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority tax increment bonds, Broomfield Event Center project, Series 2005, and providing other determinations, covenants, and details in connection therewith.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading and order published in full? Councilmember Leslie.
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen.
I second this motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2261. All council members, please enter your vote. And now the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Front and Mr. Romine. The final item under action items this evening is council's consideration of a resolution regarding council's event sponsorship policy. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Rogers is making her way to the podium and will provide the presentation on this item.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. This evening, we're talking about a resolution that would solidify an event sponsorship policy for council. I want to make it clear we're talking about events. This is absolutely separate from the human services grant process that is done much more formally. This is a $40,000 budget that council has to go to galas and fundraising events sponsored that are put on by our local nonprofits. This came up as part of council's April 2024 special study session that there was a need for a formalized policy. It had been sort of casual over the years, but as we all know, the needs are increasing with nonprofit events and their fundraising needs, and the requests are increasing in number, not only in quantity, but also in the number of dollars that are being requested. Council requested that a formal policy be put in place by resolution that would be approved by council, and it could only be modified in the future by an act of council to amend this resolution. Next slide. So Resolution 2024-134 contains the following criteria. There would be one event sponsorship per nonprofit per calendar year. Nonprofits must be based in Broomfield or directly serve Broomfield residents. Funding is capped at $3,500 per event, and a reserve is built in the sponsorship budget in case potentially we get a new event in fourth quarter of a year and hadn't spent all the money in the start of the year. The reserve is held until about November, although updates will be made to council throughout the year. And then council can then have, last minute Christmas gala event by a nonprofit in the community. Next slide. The procedures would be as follows, and they would be handled by the CMO, the city manager's admin team. There's a little bit of two ways. Upon receiving an event request, admin team would respond with a form to just get some more information. What are we talking about? What type of event? Is it a table purchase? And what's the price point? They would check to make sure the nonprofit met all the criteria. And then they would also see if there was a previous donation or event sponsorship for the nonprofit and if there were sufficient funds in the budget. If so, then it would be sent to council for approval. To streamline this process, and given the time of year that we're at, we are proposing that staff follow this procedure. Council attends much of the same events year after year. So at the beginning of the year, we would present a slate of those events. So you can do a lot of the approvals at the start of the year. Then when the X event comes up in August, we just work on scheduling. There would still be the information gathering from staff, so we know that they're based in Broomfield, they're nonprofit, that they're only asking for $3,500 or less. If by chance we got a request and somebody didn't meet some of those objective criteria, staff could administratively deny that request. Next slide. And I sort of jumped ahead of myself. Council considers and approves these requests at a public meeting. We would do that early in 2025 slate proposition. And then if a new event came up, we would present it to council, most likely on the consent agenda, but it could be moved to action items. Outreach regarding this policy and procedure is going to be communicated to nonprofit groups that council routinely is involved with late in 2024 and also early in 2025. And then we will continue to track these sponsorships on the publicly available sponsorship tracking sheet. That is all, Mayor. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If anyone would like to speak on this item, please make your way to the podium. Not seeing anyone online. Questions from council are next. Any questions from council? It's Button. Councilmember Marsh Holston,
Thank you, Mayor. I went first earlier. I just want to make sure I wasn't.
you just practicing your button?
Yeah. So just question, one thing that we've talked about in the past, regarding this was the Adams 12, the Five-Star Foundation. In the past, we've sponsored their Top Golf of that. Is that correct?
Correct.
As well as given them a $1 or $2 per pupil.
Yes, Councilmember Marsh Holston, it was $2 per pupil in the past. Support to the Adams 12 Foundation, which is their nonprofit arm. And then in addition, up until 2023, council would also sponsor the 2024, council would also sponsor the 5-star events. In 2024, council did the $1 per pupil, which was $6,500.
So in years past, we've given them $15,000 to $17,000. And now my understanding is
Correct.
that we're limiting this to $3,500.
This would be limited to
Have we
$3,500.
heard anything from them specifically on the impact that this would have on them?
No, we haven't, Councilmember Marsh Holston. And I also want to do a caveat to this. This is just the process. I guess it does have that $3,500 cap if council wants to address but this doesn't necessarily address the overall budget item. That's something council approves when they approve the budget.
And no, just so I am clear, this is just the event sponsorship. So for example, the foundation, they could use this procedure for the Top Golf, for example, and the money that we've traditionally given out of this fund, they could go through the normal grants process too, if they wanted to.
Can I defer that question to Mr. Casey? Because you're asking if Adams 12 Foundation could utilize our human services grant process to get funding to support their nonprofit.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Marsh Holston. Yes, they could apply if they meet all the criteria. One, serving Broomfield residents, and that money would be for Broomfield residents only, the way it's established now, and 501c3 nonprofit designation.
Okay. Okay. That's the only the questions I have. I will just caveat so everybody is aware. I am a parent of an Adams 12 students, but my wife also serves on the Adams 12 school board. So just wanted to make sure that is put out there. So.
And if I can, Mayor, before we move on, and I also want to be clear, we're talking about the Adams 12 Foundation, not necessarily the school district. It is their 501c3 arm.
Right.
All right. Thank you. That's all.
All right, thank you. And we have 5 different, at least, school districts that serve Broomfield residents. Adams 12 is just one of them. And to my knowledge, we don't do that $1 per student with any other school district, correct?
I don't believe so, Mayor, but I'd have to do a quick search, but I don't believe so.
I didn't think so. Okay, any other questions or comments from council? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members council members and council as a whole have sponsored, I should say, back up. Council as a whole, as a body, has sponsored events for years now, even well before I was on council. There is a desire by local nonprofits to have council members attend these events in that capacity as council members, as representatives, city and county. So I think that while this policy didn't exist then, doesn't mean that it wasn't being done. But I do think by putting this policy in place, there is much more transparency with the process, who this money is going towards, and how this money is being approved. So I do appreciate staff bringing forward this policy, and I appreciate council members for engaging with this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ditto. Any other council member questions, comments, feedback? Oh, okay. Like you hit a home run. Ms. Rogers? Then next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2024-134. Will the clerk please read the resolution by title?
Resolution number 2024-134, approving council's event sponsorship policy.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember Henkel?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Leslie?
Second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Then, council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember, thank you. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers, for our policy.
Can I also give a quick shout out to Kelly Cole, who's in the back
And
of the room,
Kelly.
who will be your key person for this policy and will deal with a lot of the scheduling and the outreach to our nonprofits.
She already does so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Cole. Can we clap for Kelly? Quietly behind the scenes, she keeps it all together. All right, moving on. We have 3 items under the mayor and council member request for future action section of this evening. First, I have a request for future action regarding the creation of a human rights ordinance. I want to state that this is not a discussion on the topic and instead is an opportunity for council to provide staff direction on whether or not council desires staff to dedicate time and resources to this request. I will now present my own 5-minute outline. A human rights ordinance specifically protects against discrimination in 3 areas: in housing, employment, and public accommodation. Within these areas, the ordinance prohibits discrimination based on ancestry, color, creed, gender variance, genetic characteristics, immigration status, marital status, mental disability, national origin, physical disability, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, and source of income. In housing, it also prohibits discrimination based on custody of a minor child, parenthood, and pregnancy. In employment, it also prohibits discrimination based on age, specifically age 40 and older. Why do we need a local human rights ordinance? There are 2 primary reasons for creating a local protection at the local level. This protects classes which are not protected at the state or federal levels. State and federal agencies are dealing with a much larger volume of complaints, and therefore a complaint at the state or federal level can be time-consuming. A local human rights commission or hearing officer is generally able to process complaints more promptly than larger agencies. Our attorney's office has confirmed that council has the authority to enact a civil rights code to prohibit discrimination in Broomfield businesses, housing, and places of public accommodation, and would need to either stand up a local civil rights office and civil rights commission or a hearing officer to investigate and enforce violations in order to provide the teeth needed to make the code impactful. Hearing officers are already being utilized instead of commissions on our Board of Equalization, Local Licensing Authority, and soon to the Personnel Merit Commission. So there are other cities that already have this in place locally. It's City of Boulder, City and County of Denver, Fort Collins, Aurora, Telluride, and Colorado Springs. So I'll go ahead and end that there. And now we'll proceed with public comments, starting with in-person. If anyone would like to comment on this item, please make your way to the podium. State your name and neighborhood for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Council, city staff, and I would just say, I think this is a great idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. I'm actually speaking to your proposal and also one that was introduced or will be introduced by Heidi Hinkle and Todd Cohen. Is that okay?
That's fine.
To
Yeah,
do it now?
Yeah, go
Or should I
ahead.
wait till after they present?
It's up to you. I'll let you go ahead and do it. I made an exception earlier for a gentleman who wanted to go earlier. It's okay. I know you've been waiting.
Could you give me my 20 seconds that I just lost? That would be
We can
nice.
restart it. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'm in charge of that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm here to strongly endorse the proposal offered by you, Mayor, to enact local laws that prohibit discrimination. And I also wish to endorse and support the initiative of Councilpersons Heidi Hinkle and Todd Cohen to address the needs of our immigrant and refugee populations. Our community is growing rapidly, becoming increasingly more diverse. Assuring we have enforceable ordinances to protect human rights is of critical importance. We cannot, should not depend on federal or state agencies to enforce these rights. Local solutions to local problems are much more successful and long-lasting. Immigration, for some time now, has become a polarizing political issue, but that not need be the case here in Broomfield. Immigrants provide important contributions to our culture and certainly to our economy. Welcoming refugees who are fleeing repression should be something we embrace, not reject. As a council, you spent hours considering issues affecting our physical infrastructure. This is necessary work. I remember attending a meeting several years ago where you spent hours discussing and debating a proposal to approve a new 7-Eleven store. Good, you have to do that. But our community also has human relations issues that should be addressed by city government. One mechanism that I'm most familiar with is the creation of local human relations commissions. In my career with the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, some of my most rewarding work involved working with local governments to establish such commissions. Excuse me. The financial costs are minimal. Members are appointed by council. They serve in a voluntary capacity. These commissions serve as the eyes and ears of local governments in identifying and proposing solutions to human relations issues affecting the community. I give you one example that I was involved with. It was in Fargo, North Dakota. There was a refugee resettlement program that was sponsored by the Lutheran Church. So the Sudanese people arrived in Fargo, North Dakota, a little bit of a culture shock, but they were facing some prejudice and some discrimination, and it was an issue. And I sat down and I talked to the mayor and I said, you know, I can spend a couple days here, do an investigation, file a report. What really needs to happen is a community needs to come together to address the issues. He set up a committee of local leaders with faith leaders, business leaders, community organizations. They had meetings in that community with the Sudanese population. The police department was there. Different organizations were there. They worked together. And you know what the result was? Greatly reduced tensions in that community. That's the way it should work. That's the way it could work here in Broomfield. I'd be greatly pleased, or would be very pleased, to work with you and your staff and offer technical support should you determine that this would be an idea that this council might want to pursue. Thank you and have a great holiday.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Did I make it
Jones.
within the time?
It's just a couple seconds. You did.
Okay, well,
Good job.
I asked for my 20 back, so thank you very much.
I appreciate
I
it.
yield my 18 to the seconds to the next speaker.
Thank you very much. All right, so anyone else want to comment on the human rights ordinance?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Again, Martin Dormish from Ward 1 and the Birch neighborhood. And with your permission, I'd also like to speak on this one and the following one because I have to go pick up my daughter from work.
I'll allow it.
Thank you, Mayor. So I really agree with the prior two comments from public, and I would just add another piece on both of these items that I think the best of Broomfield is that Broomfield is a welcoming community. When it is operating in its best self, we're a welcoming community. And I think this ordinance, this human rights ordinance, can help support that and protect the ability to do that as a community. And then the follow-up item about immigration and becoming an immigrant-friendly community, I think is really important for us because it recalls our history as a community. And I think that it's important in these moments to recall that the original occupants of this land were displaced forcibly from this area, the Arapaho people who lived here and in the Boulder Valley. And when that happened, there were other settler immigrants who arrived here, and they were from places like Germany and Sweden. That's not that different from welcoming immigrants and newcomers to our community in this day and age from other places like Afghanistan and Venezuela. And I think also the other point I would like to make just briefly is that we're in the season of Advent, and I'm a minister, and so this is an important season for me. It's the beginning of the church year for many people who are of the Christian faith. And one of the primary purposes of the season of Advent is to remember and to prepare for the birth of Christ. And I would just point out that the Holy Family themselves were also immigrants, forcible immigrants who were forced to leave their homeland and go to another place, Egypt. And I think in light of that, I think if we can think of that story, then we can also extend that same sort of welcome in light of the fact that we could be welcoming Christ himself in our community. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays. Any other public comment on the human rights ordinance? All right, we'll go to council. Any questions on it or no? Councilmember Lim.
It wasn't absolutely clear to me that if will this come forward as a study session, or will this come forward as a resolution, the ordinance, the human rights ordinance, but then what would be done with the enforcement or part of this, as far as if it were just to come forward as an ordinance? Go ahead,
Mayor,
Ms.
I
Rogers.
think from staff's perspective, the ordinance would have the entire program in it. It would prohibit the discrimination and then also have a provision about how enforcement would take place. And that would all be in the ordinance. Depending on the direction we receive tonight, I guess we can talk about if a study session is needed or if there's sufficient direction to just bring back the ordinance. At this point, based on the request, I'd probably look to model it off of Boulder and then take notes based on some of the input we hear tonight.
Okay, does Boulder have a hearing officer, or do they have a commission?
They have a commission structure.
They do. The city manager or designee is tasked with the investigation, and then if the person isn't satisfied with that outcome of that investigation and the determinations, they can appeal to their Human Rights Commission.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other council comments, questions? I was thinking it would be a study session so we could iron out the details and process. I wasn't, because it's just a framework of an idea at this point. So we'd want to customize it to suit Broomfield if you guys are in support of moving forward. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do support this. And then I'd perfectly fine going forward with a study session to iron out some of those details. I think probably the biggest one council might have is, do we do a hearing officer or a commission?
Perfect. Councilmember Marshallson?
Ditto.
Okay. Thank you. So is everybody okay with moving forward with the study session on the human rights ordinance? All right. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. We'll be moving on. The next item of business for council's consideration this evening is Councilmember Henkel and Cohen's request for future action regarding taking steps toward creating an immigrant inclusive environment in Broomfield. Like before, this is not a discussion, but an opportunity for council to provide staff direction on whether or not to move forward. Council members Henkel and Cohen, you have 5 minutes to present.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start. And it might be sufficient for me to just say, refer to the comments by Mr. Dulles and Mr. Dormish and just say ditto. They expressed the thoughts very well. This is a proposal in recognition of the original initiative that Councilmember Henkel brought forward last spring, and there's been some council feedback. So this reflects the feedback, I think, for the more closely the direction the council would support. It also reflects, I think, the existing status in Broomfield that we have immigrants. Immigrants are residents of Broomfield, whether they be documented, naturalized, undocumented, or refugees by reason of a variety of reasons. They could be refugees. It also reflects, I think, the foreboding cloud that's coming and that we'll be living under shortly within a month and for the next 4 years, that there is a new administration that is targeting immigrants, not just undocumented immigrants, but legal immigrants. They've talked about denaturalizing naturalized citizens. And unfortunately, that kind of policy and talk can inspire a lot of fear, intimidation, and vigilante action beyond what the new administration will do that will impact residents of Broomfield who are immigrants, who may not feel entirely welcome within our community. So I think it's timely that we take this action along with the Human Rights Ordinance, that we make sure as a local municipal government and as a community that all residents feel welcome, but all residents also can access the services that are available to them through the city and county of Broomfield. So there are two measures here designed to go in that direction. One is simply a statement of immigrant support, and that could be done through, in this proposal, a national recognition of National Refugee Day on June 20th during National Heritage Month. Secondly, there is under the heading of equity lens, in responding to council feedback, a recommendation or an ask that our DDI office be asked to take on the task to do an assessment of how accessible our city services from our city council agendas to our front desks in our city county building to policies and other services, how accessible they are to all residents. Are there any barriers? Often in my experience, you don't recognize those barriers unless you look for them. So it requires a purposeful effort to go and look and see if there's any inadvertent barriers in place that are hindering folks in accessing the services they are legally eligible for. And we think the DDI office would be the most appropriate. It fits within their mission to accomplish this. That's my statement.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinkle, did you have anything to add?
Not at this time. I'll probably add comments during discussion. Thank you.
Okay. So public comment time. Would anybody want to speak on this item? Please come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes-ish. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Sandy Anderson from the Broadlands, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council Member, City Executive Staff. I'm speaking in support of both the creation of a human rights ordinance and the creation of an immigrant inclusive environment, and that request for future actions. It's just so timely, being December, the month of peace and goodwill to all, and the most well-known refugee story in the last 2024 years that this is on the agenda. In a time in our country when refugee families seek asylum at our borders, and they were unwillingly separated from each other, and newcomers are scapegoated with they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets. We should consider that central story. Shortly after the birth of Jesus, Joseph and Mary were forced to flee with their young son from Nazareth to Egypt to escape King Herod, a tyrant. They feared persecution and death. What if this family sought refuge in our country? Imagine Joseph and Mary separated at the border, and Jesus, no older than 2, taken from his mother and placed behind the fences of a border patrol center, as more than 5,500 children had been through 2020, or rounded up and deported back to King Herod. It's kind of ironic that so many consider themselves a follower of this religion, but don't follow the words of their Savior. Jesus grew up teaching kindness and mercy and a radical welcome of all people. He said, "I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me." That's from Matthew. Jesus also said in John 13, verse 34, "I give you a new commandment, love each other as much as I have loved you." He didn't say, just love the people that look like you. He didn't say, love the people that talk like you. He didn't say, love the people that act like you. And he certainly didn't say, love the people that love like you. I know that you guys have been very brave fixing so many mistakes, misjudgments, and historical miscalculations this year. Going into 2025, please keep moving us forward so Broomfield can be the best it can be to all of us who call this home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and staff. My name is Janet Sund. I'm in Ward 5, and I am not totally against immigrants. I'm against us just taking in everybody. I tried to ask Heidi Hinkle, and I sent questions to Heidi and the council members, and she gave me some wonderful responses, which I'm just going to briefly summarize. And they were very good responses, and I do appreciate that. The things that I'm concerned about are the cost to the citizens of Broomfield, the impact that the immigrants will have to our schools, how it's going to impact the students from learning. Is their learning going to be detracted from because the teachers are trying to work with these other students that don't speak the language? How much is that going to be a distraction? Other issues, if you look, I wasn't getting any real data from Broomfield as far as cost, but I did come up with costs based on what Denver is going through. And the last time I checked it, it was costing the Denver residents about $500 a year. But if you add their taxes that they have to pay for employment taxes, it's $720 a year per household that people have to pay out. And I cannot afford that. I really can't. And other people I know can't. I was looking up what Denver's issues are, and they have so many immigrants coming in that they're having to limit their shelters to 5 days, and then they go on the streets. There's too many people coming in, and Denver is the top city in the nation for attracting immigrants. And that is going to flow over into all of our other cities, our communities, and we're part of that area. Denver Health, for example, they get most of the people, the immigrants coming through them. They're looking for $10 million to pay for unpaid medical bills this year from immigrants. Denver Mayor Mike Johnson is estimating that $100 million is needed in 2024 to pay costs that they don't have in their budgets, that they don't have resources to cover for housing, school, and healthcare, which healthcare is part of that. Denver Health, and they're requesting help from the federal government for assistance because they can't afford to pay this. And if they can't afford to pay this, I don't know how the city of Broomfield can afford to pay for these extra costs. Police, I contacted the police today to find out what the issues are with immigrants. And they said they weren't able to give me information on anything other than basic licenses or insurance issues. They don't track violent crime. I'd have to contact an FBI agent to do that.
Ms. Sun, can you wrap up your thoughts, please?
I do appreciate all what you're trying to do. I was not getting any information as far as how many immigrants you're going to limit. We cannot just take in everybody. We have costs. And the people that Heidi said that were coming in came from some very concerning countries. Venezuela, the Middle East. I'm concerned about people coming in that might be violent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and staff. I'm originally just going to voice my strong approval of this idea. The defense of our neighbors against the clown show that is looking to take residence in Washington is a very important thing to me. However, a few concerns have come up, obviously, in the time between my arrival at the podium and my chance to speak at it. And I will say simply that most immigrants are a net benefit on the economy. They pay for themselves. Housing is mostly the issue that you're concerned about, where, but that's a problem for everybody at the moment. Violence is so incredibly overblown that nobody in the actual control systems of all this, the local police, don't actually care. In general, it's a monster that is very scary on TV and doesn't really exist here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roxy Jula Lockmore. CCOB already treats everybody as equal as possible. That's why we love this community, because they already do. If you change that and you brought attention to one group, you will change that. You'll make it to where people will not want to be here because you're putting the light on one group of people. I have family that are immigrants. We helped pay to get them here. We went through the legal ways of doing everything. It was a hardship on our family, and we went ahead and followed it. This thing with everybody not being treated equal or thinking somebody has to be treated better than others is not how I grew up. That's not why we're here in Broomfield. Everybody's equal in Broomfield. Don't draw no attention unless you want people to start fighting. We don't need that. We don't need any extra fighting. We treat everybody as equal as possible. I do not see that we need to waste any money on making any ordinance or anything else, because immigration is a federal rules and regulations and laws. You still have to abide by the federal laws. In doing anything that Broomfield, you're going to say that we have to regulate differently. So think about it. It'll be a waste of time and money if you go and try to make new rules for your community, because if they're not as strict as what the federal laws are, they're not going to work, and you're just going to cause everybody to start fighting. Just treat everybody equally. That's all you have to do. Broomfield does it very well. So just stay on the course of treating everybody equally in Broomfield. CCOB, City and County of Broomfield. Remember where you're at.
Thank you.
Hi, Kim Tuisini Pansai from The Outlook. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, City staff. Two thoughts that I have. One is, if we have immigrants in schools, I think that's a blessing and an opportunity, and it enriches everyone's education. We don't have to think of education just as you have to meet test requirements. There's so much more to being in a more diverse environment and seeing different cultures and living with people day in, day out, that enriches the environment and the education greatly. So that's one thought. The other thought is the concern about the next 4 years. What if the federal executive powers start to change or the laws start to change? We have an opportunity in Broomfield to make it very clear by codifying these resolutions that even if laws change at the federal level, we take precedence at the local level by codifying these things. And we protect everybody because it's in black and white. This is what we will do. This is what we will not do, regardless of what might be happening at the federal level. And therefore, I think it's really important to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have someone on the phone that called in to comment. So we're going to go to our caller. John, you're on. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. It's John Ewalt, Pinnacle North. So I just want to second everything Ms. Jewell said. I don't know if Animal Farm is still required reading in high school, but there's a phrase that sticks with me, and that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And some of what is being talked about tonight really feels like that. Are there things we can do to make people feel more welcome, like translation services, things like that? Absolutely. But I would like to see that we're actually solving a problem and not making new ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments before we move on to council? All right. Any questions, comments from council? Councilmember Marshall-Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely support moving forward with this. I think it's a good, absolutely essential thing to do given the state of the country right now. To one of the commenters, immigrants are very unfairly demonized in the national rhetoric, and that's just not the data doesn't support that. Immigrants actually commit less crime than native-born citizens. They contribute to the economy greatly. There's a whole list of benefits to immigrants, and we are a nation of immigrants. And I think that any opportunity we have to stand in solidarity with our neighbors and our, fellow man, I think is fellow women, fellow mankind, whatever, however you want to say that. People, I think is a good thing. So I absolutely support moving forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to be pretty, just echoing my fellow council members' thoughts that immigrants are a community that own businesses. They're our neighbors, they're our friends, they're family. I'm the son of immigrants. My father and mother were refugees from the Vietnam War. And I feel like this is a good step to continuing supporting our community in Broomfield. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I support the statement of, or the proclamation in June for immigrations. I just have one question that I really want to make crystal clear for everyone as it relates to number 2 in the packet that you guys had attached with your request for future action. It talks about equity lens. This is really just asking staff to be more introspective with our services and how we interact with populations that are not native speaking English or born citizens to the United States, correct?
Councilmember Henkel.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. In that case, I fully support staff looking more introspectively and trying to really identify areas in which we can improve on the services that we offer. I know you mentioned a few in the the document that you forwarded, such as, where is it here? The trash hauler notice was only in English and was not provided even in Spanish or any other language that occurs in the city and county of Broomfield. So I do support that.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I just want to kind of take a step back to where we were just over the past year. And our staff spent a considerable amount of time looking into, and providing at that most recent council meeting, going through all of the things that we are already doing. We spent a lot of staff time on that, and then the scope changed. So I guess my question here is, how much staff time is this going to take this internal look? Do we have an estimate of the amount of time this will take? Is this like just a minimal type of, I guess it's a question for staff, like how much work will this be to accomplish this next level of investigation into what we are providing?
That's a good question. And it's hard to really answer that.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may, I think.
Mr. Casey.
Yeah, that is a difficult question to answer right now until we have a full understanding what the expectation is for moving forward. I would think that the review of a lot of the things that we did for that prior council meeting could be included in some of this work. And again, it would be hard to identify exactly how much time that would take, but it would definitely be a lift.
And that is my concern there. The proclamation, we do proclamations all the time. We recognize different groups. I don't have, we can definitely move forward with that, but I think we need to be very careful about how much time we're putting into just determining what we have. And if there's specific things we want, like just a translation of an agenda, that might be easier, but evaluating everything we have, I think we need to spend less time evaluating and more time the gaps that we already see. If there's simple things we can do that will really make a difference, we can do those things. But I'm not supporting this deep dive and again into what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, before we start talking about proclamations, the proclamation process is the purview of the mayor. Something like an immigrant support statement would be more suitable through resolution, which would require all of council. The proclamation's just me. So if you guys are in support of moving forward with a statement of immigrant support, then you would need to do it by resolution. And next is Councilmember Lim.
I'll follow up to that statement. Can we do a resolution of immigrant support for National Refugee Day? Can we do it for a certain day rather than a general statement? Okay, okay. I mean, that's what they were proposing, was for a certain day. Okay, I guess I would ask if those who brought forward the future action would be willing to specify more clearly what they want the DDEI office to look at. It does seem like a very broad ask to have them to look at everything. You listed particular things. Is that the scope of what you had in mind, or did you really mean to have them look at everything across Broomfield and how it would impact newcomers? Can I have them answer that?
Yes, which one of you would like to address that? Councilmember Cohen.
I think what we're asking is for DDI office, which is most prepared in this area, to come back with a proposal for how to do that. They are fully equipped, I think, to come up with that. We don't want to be too prescriptive. And there are toolkits out there that other city and county governments have used to accomplish this. So there are resources that they can bring back to council and say, hey, we've looked at these. This would be the best method forward. Additionally, this is something any government should do on a routine basis. As your population changes, as your needs change. To Councilmember Anderson's point, we don't know necessarily unless we look to see whether we're fully accessible to the full audience. It's very easy for people who've lived here for a long time, or maybe a majority and speak English, to not see small barriers that may exist, that other people may be experiencing and don't feel confident as immigrants, as refugees, as newcomers, raising their hand and bringing attention to themselves, that they don't know how to access these services. So if hopefully that answers your question, we don't want to be too prescriptive. We think the DDI office is best equipped to come back to council with a proposal of how to accomplish this goal.
Yes, I would prefer that we ask them to look at those items that they think to bring back the items in a leveling. So those items that would be easily done and by Broomfield, and which would take a longer term effort when they come back, is what I would ask. Thank you.
Just before we move on, is it clear what is being asked of our DDI department? Because I'm not clear.
Mayor, I am not clear either. If we
Okay.
could get a little more specificity, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we need more specificity. Obviously. So I feel like y'all kind of did a deep dive on the welcoming city research, and maybe that needs to be looked at again. Like, what are all the things we are doing to realize what we're not doing? And the only example in here is translation services that for all of our other materials, but I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So that was kind of my question. So another council member stated, I support all of this. But my question was, what exactly are we supporting? There was a statement of Refugee Day, and that was, there was terminology used as a proclamation or a resolution. Obviously just this alone needs to be clarified. I don't know for certain what this is going to be, said in this proclamation or resolution. So I'm not sure if I can support that at this point. So that seems, would need to be, come forward. So just trying to figure out what that would mean. That one's, fairly minor, in terms of potentially what it is. But the other one is much broader. The recommendation for our DDEI office to do an assessment of how accessible our services are for all residents. So my first question is, does this fall within operations or policy? It seems much more operations focused, that we are going to ask that you do an assessment of all of our services in this area. So it seems much more operations focused. We do act on motion, ordinance, or resolution. So I would expect at minimum, this idea would come back to council as a full proposal for council to act on this matter, which I think, to staff's point, we would need to have this much more, the idea of this fleshed out much more than we do tonight. So I think that questions that I would ask at that point are, do we have staff capacity for this work? Will this require any additional FTEs? It has been suggested that the DDEI office be the most equipped to do this work. But I'm curious, has there been a conversation with the sponsoring council members and the CMO office and the DDEI staff to even know whether they're most equipped to do this work? And then just wondering how will it be decided on what the assessment will entail? Will there be a report on how many resources will be required to ensure the services are accessible for all residents? So I have a lot of questions at this point, but the big piece is, what are those next steps? What does those next steps look like? How is this going to be crafted? If, as another council member stated, I support all of this, what does that next step look like before this is actually completed by staff?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think what you just outlined is exactly what would need to occur if we were given the direction this evening that council wanted staff to go forward and continue working on this. It would be a conversation with our DDEI group, which has various responsibilities, including developing our learning platform. They are looking at our accessibility to address the state mandates in that regard. They have a lot of broad tasks. So as was addressed, whether they have the capacity to take this on within a certain period of time, we would have to look at that. But if the direct is given this evening for staff to provide that deeper dive into this work, additional conversations would likely be needed with the sponsoring council members, as well as with those in the DDEI department, to determine the timeframes that it could potentially be brought back for council for additional discussion.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That's enough for now. Thank you.
All right. Then we have Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to address just some comments made by people who spoke. I do want to reiterate that we cannot discriminate on who lives in Broomfield. And I know I included that in my email. We already have people here who are either being housed in other people's homes Or, they have family or co-sponsors here. That's why they come here. They don't necessarily say, hey, I'm coming here because I get free food and free everything. That's not why they come here. They come here for comfort. Their homes have been obliterated. We cannot send them back to Ukraine. Their homes no longer exist. Same with Afghanistan. So all of this talk about deportation, they wouldn't be able to go anywhere. So for us to say, you don't belong here, they don't belong anywhere. So that is something I need to really tell people. Another thing too is that our immigrant community has been personally asking me to act on their behalf, and I did not ask them to come speak because they are scared. It is all they could talk about at a Giving Tree event because they are not citizens yet. Even if they have their green cards, they're worried about being deported back to Afghanistan and they would be killed by the Taliban. So as much as I would love to flesh out ideas and to really weigh a deeper dive, we're talking about people's lives here and they're scared. And if you want to meet some people and I feel that you're a safe person for them to meet, I will introduce you to them. But these are real fears. These are real realizations. We know what's coming down the pipeline and all of our commissioners are talking about it. Boulder County's talking about it. Our metro area county commissioners are talking about it. We need to step forward and come up with something. And I really appreciate staff already going on a huge deep dive. I really want to tell all of our staff that. I did see that and I experienced it personally. So our workforce center, amazing. We already do a lot of amazing work. There is a realization though that we are the 2 stars amongst a 5-star obligation, or not obligation, but I would say a 5-star spectrum. We don't have to jump to 5 stars in a year. Let's take, like Councilmember Lim said, let's look at maybe our readily available fruit, our low-hanging fruit. I gave ideas. It took me an hour just to come up with some ideas that I felt were really palatable and easy for us to do, like the mandates on the identification and how do we get that information out. These are just small little steps. But for us to say a proclamation, and that's what we want to do, and that's their stop, that's not valuable to those who are fearing for their lives. I will also say that there are also other Equity Lens toolkits that are available. All you have to do is search. That's all I do. That's all I do all day. I learn something new about immigration every single day. And if we're willing to not only step forward and make a proclamation, but we are also willing to say, hey, if you have services that you need in the immigration realm, here are all of our resources that we have here. Here's ways that you can become involved. But part of that equity piece is ideas from our people, like Mr. Dolis came up, gave us an idea. We also got ideas on an email from our #1 food provider, Broomfield Fish, Dana. She has done an amazing job of leading that effort, and she sees people every day who are not citizens yet. And so she also gave some ideas. So it doesn't hurt to at least step forward and say, we're at 2 stars now. We've already done a lot of that legwork and we appreciate that. What are our next steps? And I don't feel it's fair or equitable for us as council to say what that next step is, but maybe our DAI programs can do that because that is what they're stood up to do, to reach people who have those equity issues. It is not the same. I appreciate treating everyone the same. I appreciate that motion, but I also want to let you know that they have different needs than us. We were born here. I'm not afraid of being deported to Afghanistan. Neither is another person who was born here and maybe didn't have as much money as me. So we all have different equitable places that we need to start off on. And I think it's a fair thing to say that people are saying that, things are shifting. I'm just putting it out there as the ask. There was an emergency last year. That was the ask. There is it's different and it's shifting, but in order to remain resilient, we have to look at the systems we already have in place. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with taking even just one step forward and doing one thing on the list that I gave as an idea, or not at all. But I don't think it's up to us as council, who are all citizens, to determine that. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. After listening to individuals speak and trying to respond to that feedback, I will say that I am supportive of either that resolution, understanding that proclamations are the purview of the mayor, but a resolution for a specific date would be great. The other item, if we need more specificity for the second note, what I would see as impactful is a requirement, this might be some sort of ordinance, some sort of rule, that public notices must be provided in English, and likely the second most common language I would assume would be Spanish. And that there is information, at least a blurb in other more common languages, that translation services are available, or this information is available to be translated elsewhere. I think that would be pretty actionable and a bit more specific. And I think that that might give us the biggest bang for our buck in ensuring that folks for whom English is not their first language are able to engage with the city and county government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Cohen.
I'll be brief. I just wanted to respond to a couple points made by my colleagues. I just want to remind everybody that this is a scaled down proposal based on what was initially proposed last spring, which was a Welcoming Cities certification process. That's a little bit more spelled out step-by-step measure. So that was not really supported fully. So they asked, this was a response of a less robust but still important effort. I think we need to remind our job is not to be totally micromanaging and telling staff step by step what to do. That's not our job, but to devise policy on a broad scale and ask council or staff, I'm sorry, how to implement that. And I think as Ms. Bertanzetti pointed out, DDI office is already well qualified and well skilled and well informed in these issues. So our natural, having already done some of this work, to come back to council and say, if the goal is how to be a force of equity lens, make sure we are being accessible to all our residents, here's the process we think you should do. And I think we should keep in mind, I've heard this comment a lot, everything's a lift. Creation of a human rights ordinance is going to be a lift for the law department. Other things, the borough thing is a lift for the economic finance department. Everything is a lift. I think we need to put this in and measure it fairly. This is not a huge lift, but I think it's a valuable lift that we should just do to ensure that what we're doing day in and day out is serving all residents of Broomfield, that no one's being inadvertently cut out. And I think the DDI office, I'm confident, can look at what's being asked, look at what other cities are doing as close as Broomfield, and come back and say, we've already done 60% of this. Here's the 40% we haven't touched, perhaps, or areas we haven't looked at because we've been doing other things. And I think that's not a heavy lift. I think that's a reasonable request. And again, we're putting it in their hands to say, what can you reasonably achieve in 2025?
Thank you very much. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify that I think we have two separate conversations going on. One is, what is the city and county of Broomfield doing and what can they do? Another one is a conversation about the immigrants and where they and deportation and where they might go. And that is not at all what we're talking about here today. We're talking about what are we asking the city and county of Broomfield to do on our staff. And so I think, I mean, this is just the problem. The problem I'm struggling with is rather than going in and analyzing all these things we are doing and doing another review of everything we have, if we have residents here or immigrants living here who are not your residents, I just want everyone thinking of people as residents. If there are individuals that are feeling they can't access certain areas or their shortcomings in certain areas, I mean, maybe we can just bring those forward and have those discussions and really listen to the people most impacted and say, what is it that you're really looking for, as opposed to going in and like auditing our system. Like, if there's specific things we should be doing, we could just say, hey, these are like, list off the things you want to accomplish. But it feels a lot more straightforward that way than to go in and have our staff review what we're doing again. So I don't want to do that again. If there's specific items, we could evaluate them as they are brought forward. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Hinkle, last word.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. Councilmember Anderson, I do. And I understand the low hanging fruit that we could look at. I also don't want to piecemeal this. It's one thing to say, oh, well, we did this over here and we did that over there. I don't want to piecemeal things based on one person's feedback. I would appreciate some intentional researching. I know that we've had people who are newcomers who gave their stories at a Broomfield Out Loud, and that's great. They have told me numerous times, and not only do they want to give their stories and be welcomed into the environment, but they also want to be a part of that change in our environment too. And I think using the equity lens allows that opening for them to engage in our government. And that's one of the things and the key pieces of the 5 stars that people go through. That first part is actually that equity lens. So that's what they recommend, and I would trust the systems that have gone before us to do this. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Here's what I'm hearing. There was, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was consensus to have a resolution, statement of immigrant support on Refugee Day on June 20th. Anybody opposed to that? No. Okay, so that's a yes. So the other one is kind of split. And I don't know where everybody really is on it, you know, I think it's hard because everybody had kind of different answers, you know, and I put a question mark by Councilmember Lim because I wasn't really sure if that was support or reservation with, I need more information before I can, you know, how much work is this going to entail, which is fair. So I am open to guidance, if anybody has any ideas. What, Ms. Burton-Zeddy, thank you.
Right, trying to find a path forward for what it is that is expected of staff, since, as has been highlighted, a lot of this is work that is an ongoing effort for Brimfield staff. So is it that council is requesting not another summary document, but more of a what's currently in the work plan? Or are you looking for a study session to go through certain items? Or I guess that's in terms of the specificity. What's the expectation for staff reporting back to council, since we are doing a lot of this work, and we'll make sure that our DDEI staff is able to review all of the comments that have been shared here this evening. I think this is great feedback for them in areas of focus, but in terms of how do we follow up with council, what's the expectation that council has in that regard?
So back to
We
y'all.
just suggest,
Thank you, Councilmember Keller.
unless I'm talking over somebody,
No.
that we ask DDEI to report back to council after a proposal for how to accomplish this goal through the equity lens. It may be a set of action steps. It may be things that have already been accomplished, but identify prep areas they haven't reviewed carefully or haven't reviewed recently. But the goal is, as Councilmember Henkel has already stated, how best to achieve that from their point of view as a DDEI office with their mission. They may come back and say, we feel confident 60% of the operations are really good, and there's only 2 areas we need to address or we haven't looked at. I don't know what the situation is. And from my perspective, as a 10-year resident, white male, I don't know what other people encounter, which is what Councilmember Henkel is saying, that people are reporting back. They are encountering barriers, but unless we systematically address them, they don't get addressed. So I think it's simply asking the DDEI office to report back to council a proposal for how to accomplish this, taking into account whatever work has been done in advance before, what their capacity is, what they think would be the best path forward. They also can take time to talk to other counties and cities that have already done this work or in the process of doing this work to inform them as what to propose to council.
Does that help, Ms. Burton-Zeddy?
Thank you, Mayor. That does help. We can look at the next year and when that work could be scheduled for. It sounds like a study session that would be reported back to the city council. And we will work on the timing for that.
All right, so then I will take a tally of who supports going in that direction. All those who want to go in that direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, we have consensus to move in that direction with it. Thank you all very much. Before we go to our last item, let's take our 10-minute recess. So we will be back at 5 till 9. we're going to go ahead and come back. Welcome back. So the final item for business for council's consideration this evening is Councilmember Ward's request for future action regarding the creation of a structure of governance committee. Councilmember Ward, you have 5 minutes to present your request.
Thank you. We saved the best for last. I will be rather brief with this because I sent all of council the proposal. Feels like forever ago, but it really was just a week and a half or so ago. Finals is stressful. So in summary, this proposal is really, I think, just an extension of the work that the Charter Review Committee did as a whole, but was not, I think, in my opinion, able to really hone in on section 4 or chapter 4 of our home rule charter. And that is, does the structure of governance that we currently have still work best for our growing community? Was it even the best one to begin with? And so this is setting up a citizen review committee. It will be made entirely of citizens. There will not be any council members sitting on it, consisting of 10 members, 2 from each ward. They will be responsible for everything. I am quite keenly aware that we have limited staff resources, and I really do want this to be a citizen initiative, and I want them to take the time to do the research and do the analysis and do the community outreach. So they'll have their chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, et cetera, that they'll pick from within the body themselves. We as council will obviously be the body that appoints those 10 members. My proposal is to have a subset of council act basically as the review of those applications, and then present a slate of candidates to the full body. Obviously, our city and county attorney's office will provide some of the base legal support that we provide for all our city and county boards and commissions, but we're not dedicating any true staff time from the city and county manager's office or anything in excess from the city and county attorney's office. Goal is to have the resolution drafted and presented for council in the January 14th council meeting. Have the members seated by April, and then they will be given until May of 2026 to provide any recommendations they have. They may come back and say, everything is perfect, and they may say, here are the 50,000 changes we think should be made, and ask the voters for approval, because any changes to the charter have to be approved by the voters. That is kind of in a nutshell the committee. They'll be tasked with researching other city and counties, cities, counties, their governance structures, what they do, how they do it. Some feedback from Councilmember Lim for specifically asked that they at least have the option to interview the city and county manager, the city and county attorney, and they will have that ability. They will interview all current city council members along with previous city council members and some other council members and county commissioners from across the state. They will provide kind of a midway report to council about how they're going to continue about this work for the remainder of their time. And in coordination with the city and county manager's office, over the course of the 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026, we will allocate $10,000 each year. If they don't use it, they returns back to the city and county's general fund, but that fund will be used for community surveys, engagement, reservation of rooms, et cetera. And that is it in a nutshell.
All
I
right.
welcome questions, comments, etc.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Anybody have, public comments first? If anyone would like to make public comment on this item, now's the time. Check online. Don't see anyone online, so questions from council are next. Any questions from city council? Councilmember Lim.
I did have a follow-up question besides the ones I'd already asked you. Is it the intention that the members who wanted to apply for this board would do so at the same time and with the same process to some degree as our regular boards and commissions?
So they will submit the initial application like all of our residents who want to sit on a citizen board or commission would. I know we are selecting candidates for the upcoming comp plan committee, et cetera, which I think those will probably start sometime beginning next year. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councilmember. We're looking at the timeframes right now, but we actually wouldn't expect that. At this point, I think we're looking at early summer-ish.
Oh, okay. Then never mind. I'm jumping ahead there. But they would follow that basic, Councilmember Lim, process of submitting a written application like all of our citizens do. It would be roughly early next year. And then the subsection of council that is selected to go over those applications. So that way it's not staff doing the some of the review would occur up through March when we make those final determinations as a whole council.
Okay. So I'm not sure I have an answer. So is this going to be a separate process and need separate communications efforts to make it known that this opportunity is available to be on this governance structure committee that would be separate from our regular communications efforts for boards and commissions?
Yes, because we normally do those communications on odd years, is that correct? For our normal boards and commissions?
Thank you, Councilmember. Corrected. The appointment is in the odd year, so the recruitment, I believe, starts at is in the even year, and so we'd start at the end of next year, 25.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Looking at
That's awful.
Deputy Michelle, that's correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
then, yes, it would fall on us a different cycle.
okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Councilmember Hinkle.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared exactly, but I will be. I did provide some feedback as far as wanted to make sure that we use the language resident versus citizens, and he agreed to that, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward. I do like the idea. I'm just not sure on the timing, but I will ask questions just so that other people know what your thoughts are on this. As far as the budget allocation, how did you come up with the budget and what were your thoughts on that?
So originally when I came up with the idea, I had not even thought of giving them a budget. But that was after talking with City and County Attorney Rogers. She had suggested that it might be a good idea to provide them with at least some level of a budget so they can do the community outreach. And that's where I came up with those numbers. And then I had a conversation with City and County Manager Hoffman about those.
Okay, thank you. And the range was 10,000 to 20,000. Are there any resources at NLC or NACO that you have found that would be helpful to this?
I think NLC and so the National League of Cities and NACO, the National Association of Counties, both provide some information on just generally what city councils do and generally what county commissioners do. Obviously, we occupy a slightly unique space, being one of, I think, 37 combined or unified governments across the country. And they just really provide some of that general overview, and I think what each community is looking for out of their elected officials and their governing body can vary even within states. So they certainly do have resources, but I wouldn't say they're the exclusive resources that I would have the committee look at.
And then you said the study session. I was just really interested in actually having a study session. And do you want to explain like why you don't want a study session or why you don't feel like it would be efficient?
I think given the level of detail that I've provided in the letter, number one, I think doesn't necessitate the need for a study session. And two, I think I do want this committee to be up and running sooner rather than later. And a study session, as you know, is going to be months out based on how our agendas are currently scheduled. Those were my two major reasonings as to why skipping the study session.
Okay, thank you. While I agree with most of this, I think that I would like to move this to next year, but that's just my thought on that. I do think it is necessary though. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So, this is kind of coming on the heels of our Charter Review Committee, which was tasked with reviewing and analyzing the Broomfield Charter and providing recommendations. They would conduct outreach and provide a forum for additional resident and public comments on the charter. So this sounds very similar to what is being proposed tonight. In fact, the first priority that was set by council was for this committee to evaluate the governance structure of the city and county as set forth in the charter, which is exactly what is being proposed tonight. So my issue with this is one, to assume that this is community driven and not require much staff resources is absurd. This will take staff resources and it will take financial resources in excess of $10,000. To have been on other boards and commissions before I was a council member, as well as since I was a council member, just the cost alone to hire a consultant is going to be more than $10,000 to serve this committee. This is not an extension of the work the Charter Review Committee did. This is a do-over of that work the Charter Review Committee did. The recommendation that came from the Charter Review Committee was not liked, and so we want a do-over, and we want to find some way to get what we want done, and I don't support this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall-Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Having served on the Charter Review Committee, I don't agree with Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf's statement. It was discussed at the role of government, the structure of government was discussed, but there was so much more that Charter Review Committee was discussing that it really wasn't given there wasn't really good outreach done on the issue. It was kind of discussed at a few meetings and then kind of pushed aside each time and then basically picked back up at the end and then no consensus was reached. So it was discussed, but it wasn't discussed in full. I do think this is a necessary step we need to take, and you all know that I've supported adjusting our role of council, the makeup of council. I do think that's something that we should be doing. It's something that's been discussed in the periphery for a long time, long before I was on council. So I do like the idea. I do have a few concerns. My concern is the money, one. I do think that I can't see $10,000 being enough to do adequate public outreach. I just don't. If you want to do polling, if they want to do polling, that's going to cost more. If they want to hire a consultant, that's going to cost more. I do think the funding is an issue. So I would look at that. It doesn't mean I don't support it. I just think that we need to be realistic of how much it's going to cost. There's other things that I think we should hash out. I think we should do a study session on this. I think there's other things that should be hashed out. For example, if this is a unique body, different from our regular boards and commissions. So do we want, for example, members of our current boards and commissions to be able to serve on this too? We have a rule that, we don't normally do that unless council overrides that. So do we want to do that? So that's a question that should be asked. I think a study session would be a good idea on that regard, as well as the budget. I also don't think that this committee should move should move fast. I think it needs to be deliberative. I think if we want to do it right, it needs to look like the community engagement that happened when we became a county 20 plus years ago. It was robust. It wasn't just, well, you should talk to a few people. It was, you should talk to the Chamber of Commerce. You have to talk to the Chamber of Commerce. You have to talk to the HOAs. You have to talk to the PTAs of the PTOs of the different school districts. It really needs to be robust and engage with everybody in the community to get a clear answer of what the community wants out of their governance. Councilmember Henkel mentioned it earlier about something else, but if you look at the Denver ballot measures on tax increases, they had two this last election cycle. One was on housing and one was on the hospital. The hospital one passed, the housing one did not. And so I was talking to one of the Denver council members that I serve with on the CML board. And what she said was that the hospital one, they did a year-long stakeholder engagement on what the need was. Why do we need the hospital funding? And that passed. The housing one kind of got thrown at the wall at the end by the mayor and just kind of didn't do a lot of stakeholder engagement, and it failed. So I think that is a lesson to be learned for this type of thing too. So I do support this. I think it is necessary. I just think we need to be realistic about the funding and the timeline, and I think we need a study session first. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple questions about this proposal. The one thing that I thought was missing is the problem definition. What is the charge we're going to give to this committee? It simply says restructure or it analyzes the structure of the government. I know the perception is going to be, oh, those council members want full-time positions, because that's been mentioned before. So can you review what is the problem definition? What is it, the goal for this committee? What was it that the charter committee discussed and apparently did not come to a resolution or rejected in terms of structure?
Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take your questions slightly in reverse, Councilmember Cohen. As to what the Charter Review Committee discussed, we had 5 meetings in which, in some way, shape, or form, part of that meeting was a discussion on the structure of governance. It predominantly centered around the size of council, although there were also discussions about should we continue to have a mayor elected at large or should they be elected from the body like Lafayette does. And one committee member suggested increasing the size of council to 15. There were some that wanted to go down as low as 3 or at least 5. And then there were numbers in between. But there was no the idea of going over the structure of governance with the background knowledge that we still have to get through an entire charter that was 50 years old. It was too daunting, in my opinion, to really dedicate the time necessary to have a fully fleshed through discussion on the structure of governance. So that's what was discussed with the Charter Review Committee. In terms of the problem statement, I think when I think of this problem statement, I don't want to predispose the committee to a certain, we want you to analyze going to a, full-time 7-member council with a strong mayor form of government or something like that. I don't want to predispose them to that idea, because I don't think it does, the community of service to just have this body say, we want to do this, study it. And I can't come up with a problem statement that you want me to have that fits not prejudicing the community. So yes, it is very vague. I realize that, but I haven't come up with a different definition or problem statement that doesn't prejudice the committee, at least in the public's eye, prejudice their work.
Did the Charter Commission discussion, I mean, was it change for change's sake, or was there discussion that there's too many of us asking questions that make for long meetings, or we're part-time, we don't have time to read the memos or provide proper oversight, or we've reached a certain size that somehow means fewer council members rather than more?
There were committee members that had brought up points such as the size of council right now is really large. Meetings go on for long periods of time. You have, over the course of the city and county of Broomfield's history, you've had council members that are far more invested and put in the time and effort to read the council packets and come up with thoughtful questions. And you have some that just come and are there to fill a seat. And then there were comments about, being able to properly do oversight and come up with the questions necessary and have the information, do your own research, et cetera, along with, people have other jobs that may conflict with some of our own outside boards and commissions appointments. And that puts pressure on certain members who have the leeway in which to take on those responsibilities, while others are not either able to, or I'm sure some have not wanted to, but those were some of the things that were brought up. And yeah, I don't think I really have anything else to add on to what was brought by the commission or committee.
I think good governance is an important topic, so I'm not saying that isn't. I think it is important that the structure works, but I'm troubled that we can't identify what the problem might be necessarily. I think that would be key before we adopt this, to say what we're looking for. I had one question. I think picking such a committee would be quite difficult. I don't know what their criteria would be. Is there any sense that we could just reconstitute the previous Charter Commission as a simpler method to get this moving? Since they were already selected through a public process and they've already apparently discussed this topic, that maybe we could ask them to come back and expand upon what changes they think we need to, what problems we think maybe we have, or what we should be doing looking toward a future when we're a community of 120,000, not 75,000.
If council so chose, we could do that. That is up for the body to make a decision. I personally do not want to go down that route because I don't think the committee as a whole was as reflective of the community as it could have been. I mean, I was the only person on the committee that represented the western side of Broomfield. That's it really is the only reason I asked to be on that committee. Otherwise, you had a number of Ward 5, there was a few Ward 3s, I think and one, other than Councilmember Marsh-Holshin, Ward 1 representative. So I think having a committee that actually is reflective of the people that live in the city and county of Broomfield, particularly for the structure of governance, is far more important and would be better served with a new committee than what was created with the previous committee.
Ironically, if we reduce the council numbers, we'd have the same issue with the lack of representation. The same issue. One advantage of having 10 council members is we have a pretty diverse council from age and backgrounds, et cetera, that we wouldn't have necessarily if we went to 3 or 5. So it's interesting that we would have to go to a large committee to achieve that kind of representation. I guess I'm struggling with going forward without a clear definition of what we're trying to achieve. at least of what issues, maybe we need to define what problems we think we have operating as a group with 10 members as part-time members before we go forward, whether it's time, whether the complexity of a city and county, what that requires, or it could be some internal reforms. You know, and since I've been on this council now 3 years, I would like to look at the committee structure. We've sort of evolved it, but maybe what we need instead of changing the committee is establishing subcommittees that focus on specific areas like budget oversight, other kind of reforms that might be easier to accomplish or might be more efficient. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
So is that like a yes or a no, though?
Sorry.
I need direction.
I guess I know, it feels too vague at the moment to go forward. Who would be on this committee without knowing what they're being asked to? I would prefer to have, you know, a problem definition written to say, this is the issue we're trying to confront. Because if I was on this committee, I mean, it would be anecdotal. It sounds like just like the Charter Commission was saying, well, maybe it could be 5, maybe it could be 3. We're too big because everybody's smaller, but that doesn't really address what problem would this accomplish? What would that fix? So I think we need to define the problem first.
Thank you. We're still on first round, so I'll go to Councilmember Anderson.
Oh, sure. Okay, so here's a couple of things that I'm struggling with here is how do we find this subset of individuals who represent us if the last committee didn't represent us, and find people who we don't have, find those individuals who don't have a predetermined outcome. They're not looking towards a certain structure, so we really have that wholesome discussion. And then how do they do that without staff resources or paid moderator or someone who's going to, I don't think you'd have to have exact right people that are going to come together and do all this research and come back with this report in this direction. That's the part I'm struggling with. And also, I guess I need someone to, I would love it if staff could refresh our memories of from what they heard from the Charter Review Committee. And what was the outcome in that area? Was it just always tabled, or did they, I don't remember if they had a clear guidance. Does staff recall any of the outcome in that area? I mean, because we could look back at that, but it'd be nice to pick up where they left off. There must have been a reason why they didn't have an outcome. So I think it's too late to put the same committee but get back together, but I also think it's a heavy lift to go find this truly representative group. And Ward 4 was not represented at all on that committee, so I don't know.
Ms. Rogers?
So Councilmember Anderson and Mayor and council members, so as myself and one of my staff members were the main members of staff that attended the meetings. And as Councilmember Ward mentioned, this was covered on the agenda at approximately 5 meetings, but different aspects of it. And I think his recitation of what was covered was pretty accurate. Like we talked about wards, the mayor, the number of councils. We did provide information that Councilmember Ward mentioned that NLC, NACO provides on governing structures, who's got a strong manager, who's got administrator, who doesn't, and just has commissioners. Looking at the Charter Review Committee's final report, evaluate the governance structure was one of the committee charges, and their recommendation was not to make, I'm trying to find their exact language because I want it to be, well, obviously the recommendation was not to change the form of government. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm not misstating what they presented to council. Yeah, same number of council members and wards. And then they started talking about term limits. As you know, they made changes to that section, but no change to the council manager form of government or the number of council members or wards.
All right, and that gives me pause too, because then echoing our Mayor Pro Tem's comments, like we already did this, now we're gonna go do it again because we didn't like the outcome. And yet if the amount of time wasn't really provided, then we I guess we could do the study session and consider it, but at this point in time, it seems like we just went through this process, so I think we need to focus on some of our other priorities. Thank you.
That's a no. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to go down the line because there's a lot of people, 5 of you, half of you that have not weighed in, and there's Heidi, Councilmember Henkel wants to speak for a second time. So, Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Delgadillo.
I am supportive of this. I am also open to aligning this a little bit more closely with our usual schedule for when we recruit individuals for boards and commissions.
All right, thank you. Got you, Councilmember Lim.
I'm supportive. I would like to align it more with the schedule for recruitment.
Okay, got you, Councilmember Leslie.
No.
Okay, and Councilmember Hinkle.
I just wanted to make sure that Councilmember Ward knew that I just really appreciate all the work that you put into this. I can tell how much thought and effort that you put into it, and I just wanted to be that positive voice up here that even though I don't believe we should do it this year, I think we put it off later. I appreciate all your work.
This year's almost over. Are you saying 2025? Because that's what he's proposing.
No, I'm saying the year after.
2026, okay. So we'll move you to no. And then who are we missing? Councilmember Ward, oh, you obviously support. So that's a tie. Okay, I have comments. I do feel like we have really pushed the limits of this government structure, this structure that was created when we were a town that was much smaller. The issues weren't as complex. There wasn't as much engagement. We weren't a city and a county, and here I sit as the only city and county mayor that's expected to do this part-time. I serve on 10 different boards, state level, regional, to represent Broomfield. The assumption is that I'm full-time because the people that are inviting me to 10 to 14 events a week are during the day. So in order to do this job well, I have to purposely stay underemployed in my second job. And I do have a second job. There's no way I could live in Broomfield for $22,000 a year. We all know that. So I can only speak for myself. I was a council member. I was one of the council members that had the flexibility to fill in the gaps for the other council members that couldn't take on a lot of boards and commissions. So I was one of those people, and about half of us are in that boat. We have flexible other jobs, or we don't have other jobs, and so we have to sit on the other 30 boards. It is a challenge. It is a challenge. I mean, I realize we're unique. We're a city running a county, but then, you know, our agendas contain things that municipal governments don't have to deal with, like the Board of Equalization, like the Board of Social Services, like the Housing Authority. These are county functions, budgeting for the detention center, all county functions that add time to an agenda, time to read, time to research, and it's part of the whole learning curve. I honestly had no idea what I was signing up for when I ran for council. And people, it was the governor, he wasn't the governor at the time. He was our congressman. He said, "You're going to be a city councilor and a county commissioner." And I nodded and said, "Yeah," not really understanding what that meant. Then you learn, and you learn that we're expected to perform at the county level, but we don't have the powers, we don't have the authority. And so it's just this weird hybrid. So the only example I can give is that our budget is a consolidated budget. It's $600 million-ish, right? That's right under what Douglas County's budget is. Right under. And having a budget that size does require a lot of oversight because we're the stewards of the taxpayer dollars. But there's no way a part-time board would have the ability to provide that oversight. That to me was the hardest thing to wrap my head around. And, you know, some of the things we went through this year with the water and sewer enterprise funds, we didn't know anything about it because we're a part-time board. We're only the policy, the legislative arm. We're not involved in the processes. We're not involved in the operations, but everybody thinks we are. And so we got blamed for that oversight, for that problem that we just found out about in May. So that's the hard part of the job. We don't have the power or authority or the involvement in the day-to-day operations, yet we're held responsible for those, they're accountable for anything that goes wrong. I get blamed for things that I have absolutely no control over. But I've learned to, you know, just that is the job. So we don't have, I mean, that's the question, I guess, that we're trying to ask. Do we have enough oversight over this massive budget and operation? And that's the question that this committee would decide. Is this good governance structure? Are we able to be good stewards of the taxpayer funds as a part-time board when you have a massive budget like this? And I don't know the answer. So because I don't know the answer, I'd be interested in exploring the answer. And so I'm a yes. So we do have direction. Thanks for indulging me. Is there any other business to come before the council from my colleagues or staff?
Mayor,
Yes.
can I do a follow-up? Is that a yes to move forward with drafting the resolution to establish a committee the way Councilmember Ward presented it? Or to have a study session?
Okay, that's a good question. Councilmember Ward.
City and County Manager, gosh, it's late. City and County Attorney Rogers got a promotion apparently. I think based on the comments that council made, a study session would be more appropriate.
Okay.
So I'm conceding
Is that okay with y'all and Councilmember Lim, study session? Okay. That's everybody. All right, thank you, Ms. Rogers. Is there any other business to come before the council from my council colleagues or staff? There being no further business, the business meeting is adjourned. Thank you.